Chapter 21. The two spirit fruits were thrown over, and Ling Shiqi subconsciously caught them. He was still a little confused. This was a spirit fruit. The spirit energy contained in it was probably more than a dozen spirit stones. Others would fight for this kind of treasure, but how could it be that they were pushing each other? And this is the reward I promised you. Delta Origi threw over a small neatly folded handkerchief. This is. Ling Shiqi did not open it but asked doubtfully. Rank 1 spiritual skill, Ghost Jade Claw. Oh. Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows. He had seen Delta Origi's Ghost Jade Claw several times, and it was enough to cut through gold and stone. Ling Shiqi hesitated for a moment, then silently put away the handkerchief, and secretly remembered this favor in his heart. Delta Origi saw Ling Shiqi accept the spiritual skill, rolled her eyes, and then asked, "What are your plans next?" "Me? What else can I plan?" "First, find a relatively safe place to heal, and then try to break through to the pure spirit realm. Now that the spirit energy of Blood Mist Island has greatly increased, there will definitely be more and more spirit cultivators in the pure spirit realm. What about you?" Ling Shiqi patted the soil on his black robe and said casually. At this time, Delta Origi's expression and gaze became somewhat heavy. After pondering for a while, she said, "I plan to establish a force." "Oh. You want to form a team?" Ling Shiqi looked at Delta Origi with a little surprise. He knew that Delta Origi hated teams, so why did she suddenly think of forming her own team? "It's not a small team, it's a force." Gu-san emphasized the word force. She continued, "Now that we have just experienced the heavenly collapse, everyone is in a state of panic. If a person with the cultivation of the pure spirit realm appears and is very familiar with the inner region, then, as long as you wave your arm, there will definitely be a lot of people willing to bow down to you. Before the other spirit cultivators of the pure spirit realm find out, they can quickly occupy territory, monopolize food and water, and even wantonly snatch cultivation resources. I will be able to grow rapidly in a short period of time. By then, even if other people establish their own forces, they will only be able to eat my bones." The Delta Origi's voice became louder and louder as it spoke. Towards the end, there was even a hint of madness. Ling Shiqi frowned when he heard that. He did not think that Delta Origi was wrong. On the contrary, Delta Origi was right. Now that the Blood Mist Island had changed, those who survived would definitely be terrified. It was indeed a very wise decision for the Delta Origi to establish a force at this juncture. But he found it strange that the Delta Origi, who had always liked to travel alone, would have such an idea. At this moment, Ling Shiqi seemed to see something in Delta Origi, ambition. Could it be that my guess just now affected her? Ling Shiqi thought to himself. At this time, Delta Origi looked at him again. Her tone was gentle, and her eyes flashed with a hint of hope. "I need you to help me." When Ling Shiqi heard this, he revealed a slightly stunned expression, and then began to hesitate. In terms of feelings, the two of them had experienced several life and death tribulations, and in this Blood Mist Island that was full of dangers, they could be considered to be people who could trust each other. Logically speaking, Delta Origi could be said to have indirectly saved his life twice, and had also given him spirit fruits and spirit techniques. Ling Shiqi should agree to help Delta Origi. However, Ling Shiqi also had his own difficulties. One of them was that he was used to being alone. Not to mention a force, he didn't even want to join a small team of a few people. More importantly, the system. Although this lottery system wasn't very reliable, it was the deepest secret in his heart. He couldn't tell anything, and he couldn't let others find out. If he joined Delta Origi's strength, how would he explain the items he got from the lottery in the future? If it was some ordinary cultivation resources, then it would be fine, but things like steel ingots and intimate paradise, how could he explain them? he couldn't explain it. Seeing Lang Shichi hesitate for such a long time, the hope in Delta Origi's eyes gradually disappeared. She said softly, "I won't make things difficult for you. If there's a chance in the future, let's work together again. Goodbye." After saying that, Delta Origi turned around and left. Lang Shichi subconsciously reached out and grabbed, only to catch a trace of a faint fragrance. After a long time, Lang Shichi sighed. Sigh, it's the hardest to repay a favor. Forget it, I'll find a place to break through to the pure spirit realm as soon as possible, then I'll be more qualified to help her. The sudden change in Blood Mist Island caused many spirit cultivators to die without knowing why. Of course, there were also many monster beasts. Without monster beasts, there were no resources. It could be said that this period of time was the most stable time for Blood Mist Island, and it could also be considered a period of rest. After Delta Origi left, Lang Shichi first found a relatively hidden place to apply the golden sore medicine on his wounds, and then quickly recovered his spirit chi. After his spirit chi was completely recovered, he drilled into the dense forest near the mountain. Perhaps it was because he had stayed in the dense forest for too long, but Lang Shichi felt a sense of comfort as soon as he came to the forest. Lang Shichi searched for a while and found a huge towering tree. This tree was still standing even after the heavenly collapse, so one could imagine how deeply rooted it was. Lang Shichi moved his feet and jumped up, stepping on the branches until he reached the top of the tree trunk. Then, with a shake of his hands, his palms turned pitch black, and his 10 fingernails grew more than an inch long, looking like a pair of ghost claws. This was the spirit technique, Ghost Jade Claw. Ghost Jade Claw at the Great Perfection stage. Using the Ghost Jade Claw that the system had just cultivated. Pucci, one of the ghost claws embedded into the tree trunk, and it actually made a sound like tofu. Then, Lang Shichi's claws moved continuously, and large pieces of wood fell down. After a while, a small tree hole that could only accommodate one person was formed. Lang Shichi drilled into the tree hole, waved his claws again, and expanded the tree hole a little. Finally, he came to the bottom of the tree and circulated his spirit chi, and a breeze blew around him, blowing away the wood shavings. Lang Shichi drilled into the tree hole again, and while recovering his spirit chi, he secretly praised the Ghost Jade Claw for being a Stage 1 spirit technique. It was indeed much stronger than the threefold palm. Threefold palm. Although it was at the Great Perfection stage, it was still an unranked spirit technique, and as his cultivation level increased, it became somewhat insufficient. Especially in the few battles in the cave, the weakest opponent was at the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm, and he had not used it more than a few times. The Ghost Jade Claw just happened to make up for this. The Ghost Jade Claw was not a spirit technique like a fist or palm, but it turned the hands into ghost claws, making them indestructible and strong enough to cut through metal and stone. Of course, this spirit technique was not easy to cultivate. It required breaking all the small meridians in the hands, and then reorganizing them. Lang Shichi still remembered the pain of cultivating the Ghost Jade Claw in the gray space. Then, he thought of the Delta Origi. He really could not imagine how such a little girl could cultivate this spirit technique to the Great Perfection stage. Chapter 22. In the newly dug tree hole, Lang Shichi took a deep breath after recovering his spiritual chi and carefully took out a green and red spirit fruit from his bag. Feeling the rich spiritual chi on it, Lang Shichi's heart involuntarily beat faster. He conservatively estimated that as long as he refined this spirit fruit, he could at least reach the peak of the 9th level of spirit gathering realm. If possible, he could even break through to the pure spirit realm in one go. Lang Shichi shook his head and restrained his thoughts. First, he adjusted his breathing for a while to make his state reach the most perfect. Then, he picked up a spirit fruit and stuffed it into his mouth. When the spirit fruit entered his mouth, it immediately turned into a viscous liquid and slid into his body. Then, Ling Shiqi suddenly felt a powerful spiritual qi erupt in his body. Ling Shiqi did not dare to be careless and quickly used the mountain-crushing force cultivation method to refine the spiritual qi for his own use. However, the spiritual qi contained in the spirit fruit was too much and Ling Shiqi's meridians were faintly aching. There was no other way. Ling Shiqi could only grit his teeth and refine them as quickly as possible. As time slowly passed, the spiritual qi gradually weakened. On the other hand, Ling Shiqi's cultivation was rapidly increasing. When there was about 1/5 of the spiritual qi left in the spirit fruit, Ling Shiqi's cultivation had reached the peak of the 9th level of spirit gathering realm. He could break through to the pure spirit realm. But at this time, Ling Shiqi was not in a hurry. He knew that the remaining spiritual qi was not enough, so he picked up another spirit fruit and swallowed it. Boom! A huge amount of spiritual qi poured into Ling Shiqi's body. At this time, Ling Shiqi's forehead was covered in a layer of sweat. He hurriedly used this spiritual qi to break through the bottleneck of the pure spirit realm, which was the Sea of Qi. In the spirit gathering realm, spiritual qi only slowly drifted in the meridians of the body. Not to mention other things, just mobilizing spiritual qi would take a lot of effort. And the pure spirit realm was to open up the Sea of Qi. All the spiritual qi in the body was stored in the Sea of Qi. Not only could it quickly mobilize spiritual qi, but it could also continuously purify it. The higher the purity of spiritual qi, the greater the power of the spiritual technique. It was the pure spirit realm. Ling Shiqi gathered all the Reiki in his lower abdomen. The large amount of Reiki gathered made him feel as if that place would explode at any time. The pain made him break out in cold sweat. However, Ling Shiqi held back and focused on controlling the spirit qi. Right at this moment. Buzz! A very soft sound came from Ling Shiqi's body. Then, it was as if a new world had been opened up in his body, and all the spiritual energy drilled into it. It was the Qi Sea. When the spiritual qi entered the Sea of Qi, they instantly became extremely docile, completely different from before. Ling Shiqi relaxed, knowing that he had succeeded. His mind sank. He could already use inner vision in the pure spirit realm. At this moment, he saw a foggy thing in his lower abdomen. It was his Sea of Qi. Of course, in his current state, let alone a Sea of Qi, he couldn't even be considered a Qi pool. Despite this, Ling Shiqi was still very satisfied, because not only did he successfully break through to the pure spirit realm, but he also directly laid an exceptionally solid foundation with the help of the spirit fruit. Ling Shiqi swallowed the last spirit fruit in one go. After refining it, his cultivation directly climbed to the 2nd level of the pure spirit realm. Then Ling Shiqi opened his eyes, and a burst of light flashed in them, which disappeared without a trace in almost 1 or 2 breaths. Ling Shiqi only felt that his body was now full of explosive power. With a thought, the Reiki in his body flowed rapidly. It was completely incomparable to when he was in the spirit gathering realm. Ling Shiqi opened his mouth, exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi, and said to himself, "I finally got a chance." Nowadays, there were very few pure spirit realm cultivators in the Blood Mist Island. They could be described as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. The earlier he broke through to the pure spirit realm, the earlier he could get better resources. At this time, a line of words appeared in front of Ling Shiqi's eyes: "The system is about to be upgraded. It will take a natural day. During the upgrade, the system will not be able to be used." Ling Shiqi looked at this line of words and thought carefully. He had just broken through to the pure spirit realm, and the system was upgraded. No one would believe that the two had nothing to do with each other. But after thinking for a long time, Ling Shiqi could not think of any clues, so he gave up. Changing his mentality, he was looking forward to it. Because he had learned before that the system would give him an unlimited lottery every time it was upgraded. Last time, he had drawn a god-level prize, unlimited skill points. What would he get if he were to try again? Now that there was nothing to do, Ling Shiqi went out to familiarize himself with the nearby environment and picked some wild fruits. After eating a few fruits, Ling Shiqi found that his need for food was lower than before, which was a small piece of good news. Of course, there was also a small piece of bad news, that was, the water source was quite far away, which was somewhat inconvenient. About half an hour later, Ling Shiqi came back. This time, going out was unusually smooth. Not to mention monsters, he did not even see a shadow of a person. He put down the bag and water bag on his body. With his current need for food and water, it was estimated that it would be enough to support him for about 10 days. Then he entered a state of cultivation. These few days were rare and stable, so he could not waste it. He had to put all his time into cultivation. A day later, Ling Shiqi stopped and ended his cultivation. Because the system had been upgraded. When Ling Shiqi opened the system, he found that the system was a little more refined. He first looked at his information, name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation, second level of the Pure Spirit Realm cultivation method, rank 1 cultivation method, mountain shattering force, bloodline. Spiritual skill, great perfection of the unranked spiritual technique, threefold water palm, unranked spiritual skill, basic sword technique, perfection rank 1 spiritual skill, confusing footwork, perfection rank 1 spiritual skill, whisking willow sword style, perfection rank 1 spiritual skill, ghost jade claw, perfection system coins. 2. Bloodline. First, Ling Shiqi found that there was an additional bloodline in his information and could not help but be puzzled. Since the system has this information, it means that there must be a bloodline in my body. As for why it is a question mark, there are only 2 reasons. First, the bloodline is very noble, and the system's level is not enough to identify it. Second, my bloodline has not been activated or awakened yet. Ling Shiqi thought and began to recall the previous memories of this body. However, as soon as he started to think, he had a headache and could only give up. He began to be curious about the memories of this body because when he first transmigrated and woke up in this body, he was already on Blood Fog Island. His memories before Blood Fog Island were blank. It seems that this body of mine is not simple, Ling Shiqi said with bright eyes. Then he stopped thinking about it. Right now, whether he could leave Blood Fog Island was still unknown. What was the use of thinking so much? Chapter 23. Then Ling Shiqi looked around and saw an icon in the system with the word backpack written on it. Oh. Ling Shiqi's eyes lit up. He clicked on the icon and 6 boxes popped up in front of him. Ling Shiqi touched his chin and picked up the package beside him. A line of words appeared in front of his eyes. Do you want to store it in your backpack? Yes. The next moment, the package in Ling Shiqi's hand suddenly disappeared and a small bag appeared in one of the boxes in the system interface. Ling Shiqi was overjoyed. Then, he put in another water bag. When he put in the second water bag, he didn't take up the third space. Instead, a small 2 appeared in the bottom right corner of the water bag box. This can be stacked. Ling Shiqi stood up in surprise. What did this mean? This meant that he could store a large amount of food and water in his backpack, and he would no longer have to waste time and risk collecting them every few days. Not to mention the risks involved in collecting food and water. Just the time saved was extremely precious. Time was cultivation, time was strength. Ling Shiqi found that this new backpack function, although it could not directly increase cultivation or combat power, was more practical and convenient. He was very satisfied. Finally, Ling Shiqi's attention turned to the lottery. He clicked on the lottery interface and there were still only 2 options, the basic lottery and the infinite lottery. The drawing for the beginner lottery was grayed out because he only had 2 system coins. the infinite lottery was lit up. Ling Shiqi calmed himself down and clicked on the infinite lottery. A colorful light flashed and the system prompt appeared. Congratulations to the host for winning the intermediate prize, Hand of Earth. Before Ling Shiqi could think carefully, his consciousness was pulled into the gray space. When his consciousness returned to his body, Ling Shiqi looked at his hands and pondered. This Hand of Earth could slightly control Earth in a small area, but it had to be touched by the hand. But what was the use? In his previous life, he knew that there were burning hands, healing hands, and so on. At the very least, they were very useful. However, the Hand of Earth could neither advance nor retreat. It looked rather useless. But then again, this was an intermediate prize, so it was definitely valuable in this regard. Ling Shiqi thought about it and decided to raise it to great perfection first. Then, Ling Shiqi opened the spiritual skill interface and clicked on Level Up. After doing this a few times, the Hand of the Earth also rose to the level of great perfection. The perfect Gaia's Hand of Earth's ability to control the soil was much stronger, and it could be controlled from a distance. However, the distance was not far, at most about 3 meters. Ling Shiqi stood up and jumped down from the tree hole. When he reached the ground, Ling Shiqi raised his hands and pressed down. Then, the ground in front of him, as well as some weeds and flowers, began to slowly wriggle. Gradually, this small piece of land turned into a small quagmire. Ling Shiqi picked up a nearby branch and inserted it into the quagmire. Looking at the depth of the quagmire, if a person fell into it, it would probably not reach their thigh. However, everyone was a spirit cultivator, so this quagmire could be forcibly broken out with some spirit energy. But this was enough. Ling Shiqi didn't intend to use this as a trap. He only wanted it to serve as an early warning. As long as the ground around the tree hole turned into a quagmire, if people or monsters passed by, they would definitely be noticed. This was the only way Ling Shiqi could think of to use the Hand of Earth. However, he always felt that he had underestimated the Hand of Earth. There must be some magical uses that had not been discovered. This was the first non-conventional spiritual skill that Ling Shiqi had come into contact with. It was not like a palm technique, a sword technique, or a movement technique. It was more like a magic in a fantasy world, and it was the kind of magic that had magical uses. Even if it had reached the realm of perfection, it still had to be slowly developed. Then Ling Shiqi turned the ground near the tree hole into a quagmire, leaving only a few footholds that only he knew. After setting up the trap, Ling Shiqi did not return to the tree hole. Instead, he planned to take advantage of the stable period to store more food and water. Now that he had the system backpack, storage was no longer a problem. He did as he thought. Ling Shiqi immediately ran in the direction of the water source. On the way, he plucked all the edible wild fruits he encountered and threw them into the system backpack. When he was halfway there, he happened to bump into a group of 7 or 8 people. He wanted to avoid them, but unexpectedly, there was an acquaintance among them. That was Yanzhou. Seeing Yanzhou, Ling Shiqi's heart was suddenly filled with killing intent. Back then, Yanzhou coveted his fine iron sword and tried to steal it. If he did not have the system, he would have died on the spot. Later, he sent people to kill him and almost died at the hands of Blood 36. Their hatred was irreconcilable. Therefore, Yanzhou must die. The moment Yanzhou saw Ling Shiqi, his eyes immediately turned red. Back then, Yanzhou's team of 9 was also a dominating force. However, after encountering Ling Shiqi, both of Yanzhou's arms were crippled and his strength was greatly reduced. Ling Shiqi even killed 2 of Yanzhou's subordinates on the spot. Later on, one of the 2 groups of people he sent out to chase after Ling Shiqi was annihilated. In less than 10 days, more than half of his team had been killed or injured. In the Heavenly Collapse incident 2 days ago, he was the only one in the team who had managed to escape the calamity due to his good luck. He was the only one left without an army. Seeing the culprit in front of him, Yanjiu could not help but skin him and pull out his tendons. However, he still controlled himself and did not let his hatred get to his head. Because his strength had not fully recovered, especially his left arm that was injured by the threefold palm, he could only move it. His combat power was not at its peak, so he was not sure if he could win. However, today, he was not alone. After the disaster, the structure of Blood Mist Island had undergone a huge change. The outer area had been greatly reduced, causing everyone to have to get closer to the inner area. The previous few teams could no longer deal with rank 1 monsters. Thus, a force was born. Just yesterday, Yanjiu was invited to join a force called Bilichuan. The leader's original name was Qing 100, but he changed his name to Bailey Qing. The name did not matter, but the key was that this person was an expert of the pure spirit realm. In addition, there were several 9th-level spirit cultivators of the spirit gathering realm in Bilichuan. Now, there were more than 30 people, and the weakest was at the 7th level of the spirit gathering realm. And this was only the beginning. There would definitely be more people joining in the future. This was definitely a big tree that could provide shade. Yanjiu joined Bilichuan almost without hesitation. The Bilichuan was divided into 5 teams, each team had about 7 people, and they took turns to act. In Yanjiu's team, there were 2 9th-level spirit gathering realm cultivators, including him. The rest were 7th and 8th level spirit gathering realm cultivators. He believed that with this strength, he could definitely kill Ling Shiqi. In his impression, Ling Shiqi was only a 7th or 8th level spirit gathering realm cultivator. No matter how exquisite his palm technique was, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Chapter 24. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red with hatred. Just as the 2 of them were about to kill, Ling Shiqi moved first. However, he didn't charge forward. Instead, his expression changed and he revealed a panicked expression. He screamed, "Yanjiu!" Then, he turned around and ran. Ling Shiqi's actions immediately caused Yanjiu to explode. He quickly shouted, "Chase him! Kill him! He has a treasure on him!" Ling Shiqi ran as soon as he appeared. No one had time to sense his cultivation. Seeing Yanjiu's expression, it meant that he wasn't very strong. When they heard the word treasure, their hearts were moved and they all chased after Yanjiu. Only a tall and thin youth hesitated for a moment, but he still followed everyone's footsteps. Ling Shiqi wasn't very fast. He was using a speed that made it seem like everyone could catch up to him, but in reality, they couldn't catch up to him. After a while, his speed suddenly began to slow down. Ha ha ha, he's slowed down. He doesn't have much spirit force left. Quickly chase him! Yanjiu excitedly shouted. He was also the one at the front. However, he didn't expect that just as he was about to catch up to Ling Shiqi, he suddenly felt as if he had stepped into a mud puddle. He lost his balance and was about to fall. Yanjiu was shocked, but his reaction wasn't slow. He quickly used his spirit force to adjust his body. But just as he was focusing all his attention on this, a flashing and agile sword had already arrived in front of him. Yanjiu instantly felt that death was coming so quickly and so close. At this moment of life and death, a loud roar sounded. The voice seemed to be mixed with spirit force. Not only did it last for a long time, but it was also deafening. Ling Shiqi was also stunned by this shout for a moment. It was during this short period of time that Yanjiu shifted his body slightly. This fatal strike only cut off Yanjiu's left arm. Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes and ignored the wailing 9 yen. Instead, he glanced at a tall and skinny young man standing at the back of the crowd. He had deliberately underestimated his enemy, and then secretly used the Hand of Earth to set up a simple trap. He wanted to catch Yanjiu off guard and kill him, but this person had interfered. "Brother, I am number 67, a captain in the Bilichuan. I sincerely invite you to join the Bilichuan. With your strength, the position of vice captain is not a problem." The lanky youth's back was almost soaked in cold sweat. He forced himself to remain calm and said these words. As soon as Ling Shiqi attacked, he sensed that something was wrong. How was this the fat sheep in their eyes? This was clearly an expert of the pure spirit realm. It was a wild wolf. At this point, he had no choice but to bring up the Bilichuan and see if he could escape with his life. As for risking his life, not to mention that in the process of chasing, everyone had consumed their spiritual energy. Looking at Yanjiu, who had already been crippled, and the 3 or 4 other trash who had also fallen into the quagmire, the remaining few people did not even have the qualifications to fight with a pure spirit realm expert. Oh. Bilichuan. Well, before that, I want to take this person's head. You don't have any objections, right? Ling Shiqi raised his sword and pointed it at Yanjiu, speaking in a tone that was neither cold nor hot. At the same time, he thought to himself, Bilichuan, it sounds like a force. It seems that someone has the same idea as the Delta Origi. However, number 67 hesitated. If he agreed, it would be equivalent to personally handing over the lives of his teammates and the members of his force. This was an act of carelessness. If news of this spread out, who would dare to easily join the Bilichuan in the future? But if he did not agree, he had no way to stop it. If he angered this person, he might even kill them all. Moreover, this person was in the same realm as their captain. It was impossible for their captain to make such a mortal enemy at the beginning of establishing his force. If they died, they would really have died in vain. Wu 67 stuttered for a moment, unable to say anything. Ling Shiqi, I was blind, I did not recognize Mount Tai. Let me go, I beg you to spare my life. I'll give you anything you want. When Yanjiu saw number 67's appearance, he knew that they were going to abandon him to protect themselves. He could only beg for mercy. When Ling Shiqi heard this, the corner of his mouth rose slightly. What he wanted had finally come. Alright, give me the tiger roar fish technique and I'll give you your life. Oh right, you guys too, use spiritual techniques or weapons to exchange for your life. If you don't have any, you can only blame yourself for not having enough money to buy your life. When the 7 people present heard Ling Shiqi's words, they all revealed different expressions. Yanjiu had the most complicated expression. His face was filled with hope, fear, regret, distrust, and so on. The others also had different expressions, but no one spoke. They were all hesitant and conflicted. When Ling Shiqi saw this, he coldly snorted. His feet moved continuously, and his figure became erratic. What followed was a series of miserable cries. In the short span of 2 to 3 breaths, the 7 people had all been stabbed in the leg. This time, Ling Shiqi had completely cut off their thoughts of running away. Moreover, they felt a sense of despair in their hearts. It was the despair of being powerless in the face of absolute strength. Number 67 now had a deeper understanding of the strength of the pure spirit realm. He was also glad that he didn't choose to go all out in the beginning. Otherwise, he would have already lost his life. If I give you the tiger roar fish technique, will you really let me go? Yanjiu's lips trembled as he spoke. He didn't have the elegance and calmness that he had when he first met Ling Shiqi. I don't want to answer this kind of question. Right now, you can only choose to believe me. Moreover, I have always kept my word. Until now, no one has said that I don't keep my word. Ling Shiqi shook his head and said. Yanjiu wouldn't believe Ling Shiqi's words even if he was beaten to death. However, there was one thing that Ling Shiqi was right about. He had no choice. He could only choose to believe that Ling Shiqi wouldn't kill him. Even if the possibility was very small, he still had to choose to believe. This was the sorrow of the weak. Life and death were completely in the hands of the strong. If he didn't have some value, he would have died long ago. Okay, I'll give it to you. Yanjiu gritted his teeth and tore off a piece of his clothes. He used his blood to write down the tiger roar fish technique. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi glanced at number 67. Ling Shiqi was also very interested in his sound wave technique. Number 67 felt Ling Shiqi's concerned gaze and couldn't help but shiver. He obediently handed over the technique. In the end, Ling Shiqi obtained 5 techniques and 4 weapons. He was very satisfied. The feeling of overwhelming strength was truly captivating. After going through the systems, inspection, and ensuring that there were no problems with the 5 techniques, Ling Shiqi's long sword trembled and his figure suddenly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. A string of figures with sword lights flashed one after another, and 4 figures fell down. Including Yanjiu and number 67, the 2 9th-level Spirit Gathering Realm cultivators and 2 8th-level Spirit Gathering Realm cultivators, they were all killed in the blink of an eye. Chapter 25. As Ling Shiqi's cultivation advanced to the pure spirit realm, the chaotic flower's dazzling eyes technique became stronger. He could now unleash 4 strikes in an instant. Moreover, it was more flexible, real and fake, making it impossible for people to figure out where the real killing intent was. Of course, against spirit cultivators of the spirit gathering realm, this advantage did not manifest because they were too weak and did not need to be so flashy. At the same time, he was also a little emotional. Less than 2 months ago, the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm was an existence he had to look up to. And now, such a person didn't even have a chance to resist in his hands. This was power. Of course, now was not the time to be emotional. Ling Shiqi looked at the remaining 3 people expressionlessly. These 3 were the weakest, only at the 7th level of the spirit gathering realm, so they stayed behind. Since they were all from the same faction, if he let them go, it would definitely cause endless trouble, so he could only silence them. When the remaining 3 saw that the other party did not keep his promise and started to kill, how could they dare to stay where they were? One by one, they ran in different directions. Unfortunately, their legs had been stabbed by Ling Shiqi, so how could they outrun Ling Shiqi, who had a body technique at the perfection stage? In just a moment, 2 people had died tragically at his hands, and the last person had his neck held by Ling Shiqi's sword. Tell me about the Bilichuan. Ling Shiqi asked coldly. Will you let me go if I tell you? Since I'm going to die anyway, do it. The person was unyielding, and after saying that, he closed his eyes, looking like he was going to die for a righteous cause. Oh. Ling Shiqi was a little surprised. He did not expect there to be someone who was not afraid of death. You have backbone, you have loyalty, but you may not know that there are many things in this world that make people wish they were dead. Do you want to try? Ling Shiqi's sword moved down, the tip of the sword pointing to the lower part of the person's abdomen. The person immediately trembled, his face turning pale, and shouted, You're not human. Don't be so nervous. I've always been a kind person. As long as you tell me, maybe I'll be happy and let you go. Besides, I only need to ask around to find out about the Bilichuan. I just don't want to trouble you, Ling Shiqi said with what he thought was a friendly smile. But in the eyes of that person, Ling Shiqi was no different from a demon. In the end, he sighed and told him everything he knew. I only hope that you can give me a quick death. Ling Shiqi nodded and gave him a quick death. He murmured, This Bilichuan is developing rapidly. Since they are developing their forces, they will definitely have conflicts with the Delta Origi. This time, we wiped out a small team from the Bilichuan. It can be said that we've hurt our tendons and broken our bones. It can also be considered as indirectly helping the Delta Origi. Then, Ling Shichi tore off the water bags and parcels from the 7 people. This group of people came out to replenish their food and water. There were more than 20 water bags alone, and of course, they were still empty. Ling Shichi put them all away and continued to walk in the direction of the water source. However, even Ling Shichi didn't notice that after he left for a while, a dark figure quietly left. The process of getting water was relatively smooth. One thing worth noting was that Ling Shichi found footprints left by monsters near the water source. It seemed that this so-called stable period wouldn't last long. Ling Shichi filled nearly 30 water bags with water and even more food at the water source. After he broke through to the pure spirit realm, his need for these things had decreased a little. If he used them sparingly now, it would be enough to last him for about 2 months. Then Ling Shichi looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he stuffed all these things into his backpack, leaving only 2 water bags and a parcel on his body. When he returned to the tree hole, the tension in his heart finally loosened. Even though he was already in the pure spirit realm, he didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless when walking outside. Today's trip, he seemed to show off his might and didn't treat the spirit gathering realm as people, casually killing them. But before that, he also deliberately consumed some of their spiritual power, and also left a trace of possibility of survival in their hearts, not forcing them to fight with their lives on the line. Otherwise, Ling Shichi wouldn't have been able to kill them so easily. It was very likely that 1 or 2 of them would run away and go back to report, then he would directly become a mortal enemy with the Bilichuan in the future. Moreover, as his spiritual power became more abundant, the bottleneck of the pure spirit realm became less difficult. There would definitely be more and more spirit cultivators in the pure spirit realm, so he absolutely couldn't let his guard down. After resting for a while, Ling Shichi took out the biggest harvest of the day. Weapons and spiritual skills. If there was anything that could increase Ling Shichi's combat power at the fastest speed, it would undoubtedly be spiritual skills. With the system and unlimited skill points, he could directly cultivate his spiritual skills to perfection. This was something that no one else could do, and it was also his greatest reliance. The weapons were 2 blades and 2 swords. Ling Shichi kept 1 sword as a spare and sold the rest to the system, and the system coins became 33. 5 spiritual skills, some were written on rags, some were carved on tree bark. Among them, there were 3 that weren't ranked, 2 blade techniques and 1 leg technique. Ling Shichi didn't care about spiritual skills of this level. Of course, he still had to learn what he needed to learn. As the saying goes, it's never a burden to have more skills. Moreover, the strengthening of the body by cultivating spiritual skills wasn't small. What he cared about the most was Yan Zhou's Howling Tiger Fist. He remembered that the Howling Tiger Fist in the hands of Blood 36 was very powerful. Ling Shichi's current spiritual skills were mostly flexible, and he really lacked such a fierce spiritual skill. There was also Wu's 67 spiritual skill, Sonic Shockwave, which was similar to the Lion Roar in his previous life. If he were to suddenly shout like this during a battle, it would definitely be a good way to win by a surprise move. Next, Ling Shichi sat cross-legged, called out the system, and began to cultivate these 5 spiritual skills. Not long after, Ling Shichi stood up with a whoosh. He simply moved his body and found that the strength in his limbs had increased by a lot. He looked at his information. Name, Ling Shichi, Lu Xingji, Cultivation, Level 2 of the Pure Spirit Realm Technique, Level 1 Technique, Mountain Shattering Force Bloodline. Spiritual Skills, Unranked Spiritual Skill, Triple Water Ripple Palm, Perfection, Unranked Spiritual Skill, Basic Sword Technique, Perfection, Unranked Spiritual Skill, 1 Breaking Blade Technique, Perfection, Unranked Spiritual Skill, 1 Hand Blade, Perfection, Unranked Spiritual Skill, 3 Shadow Kick, Perfection, Level 1 Spiritual Skill, Confusion Footwork, Perfection, Level 1 Spiritual Skill. Willow Sword Style, Perfection, Level 1 Spiritual Skill. Ghost Jade Claw, Perfection, Level 1. Spiritual Skill, Howling Tiger Fist, Perfection, Level 1 Spiritual Skill. Sonic Shockwave, Perfection, Special Spiritual Skill. Hand of the Earth, Perfection, System Coins, 33. Looking at the list of spiritual skills in the system, Ling Shiqi thought to himself, I've already cultivated so many spiritual skills without realizing it. Chapter 26. Although Ling Shiqi had cultivated a lot of spiritual skills, half of them were not ranked. These spiritual skills were not very useful, and the key was that they were all rank 1 spiritual skills. Only 2 of them were given by the Delta Origi, and the rest were snatched. Moreover, these rank 1 spiritual skills were distributed very well. There were movement techniques, sword techniques, fist and palm techniques, and the surprising sound wave technique. The Hand of Earth was also useful, and could be considered as a great supplement. Ling Shiqi nodded his head in satisfaction. He was confident that even in the pure spirit realm, his strength was one of the top few. Of course, he did not become arrogant because in his eyes, the real opponents were not these captured children. After thinking for a while, Ling Shiqi felt that what he lacked the most now was a handy weapon. His original rank 1 spiritual weapon, the fine iron sword, was destroyed by the blood-spotted leopard. The long sword he was using now was just an ordinary weapon, and it was already a bit of a burden. There were still about 10 days before the next spray of cultivation materials, so he could not count on it for the time being. Thus, Ling Shiqi saw that he still had 33 system coins. Staring at the lottery interface, Ling Shiqi decided to use the system coins to draw 3 times. This was the only use of the system coins at present, and it would be a waste if he did not use it. But thinking of the prizes he had drawn before, the only valuable thing was the lightning arrow, and it was a one-time use item. As for the other 2 things, it was not worth mentioning. Ling Shiqi shook his head, adjusted his mentality, and clicked on the beginner lottery 3 times in a row. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, 10 thorny ropes. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, 1 fine dagger. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, 1 strengthening talisman. There were a few extra things in the tree hole. Ling Shiqi looked at them one by one. He first picked up a thorny rope, each of which was about 10 feet long, with more than a dozen barbed iron caltrops strung on it. I can use this as an early warning method. If I hide the thorny rope in the quagmire, it will alarm me if someone or a monster approaches. This thing was still useful. Then, he picked up the dagger and casually played with it a few times. He felt that it was quite handy, mainly because the spiritual power was transferred smoothly, and it was much better than the small dagger from before. Ling Shiqi directly threw the original dagger to the system and exchanged it for 6 system coins, but it was not enough for 1 lottery. Finally, he looked at the strengthening talisman. It was a yellow talisman paper with a mysterious blue pattern engraved on it. When Ling Shiqi picked it up, a line of words appeared beside it. It can increase the grade of spirit tools below the 3rd rank by 1. Oh. Ling Shiqi was a little surprised. This strengthening talisman was a good thing. If he had a level 2 spiritual chi weapon, he could directly raise it to level 3 with the strengthening talisman. Even level 2 spiritual chi had a level 2 spiritual chi's was level 2 spiritual chi, level, a level 2 spiritual chi, a level 2 spiritual level 3 spiritual chi. Of course, this was to maximize the effectiveness of the strengthening talisman. If it really did not work, it was completely acceptable to raise the level 1 spiritual chi to level 2. At this time, Ling Shiqi glanced at the long sword beside him, then put away the strengthening talisman. An ordinary long sword was not worth using this strengthening talisman. Although it could give him another level 1 spiritual weapon, to be honest, Ling Shiqi's improvement was not very big. He planned to wait until the next eruption of cultivation resources. It would be best if he could get a spiritual weapon, if not, he would use it on this long sword. Then, Ling Shiqi spent some time to arrange the thorny rope and entered into cultivation. In this trip, he completely felt the benefits of being strong, so he should speed up his cultivation. While Ling Shiqi was cultivating, on the other side, in an open space near the mountain wall, there were about 30 people busily going in and out. They were talking and laughing, and it looked quite lively. They had already set up a few sheds in the surrounding area. In the largest shed in the center, a tall young man was sitting on a stone stool. Looking at his expression, he did not seem to be in a good mood. Beside him stood a black-faced young man, smiling as he said, "Leader, don't mind it too much. This time, it's fine to let that brat Yushirsi take advantage of us. After all, we were few in number and could not use force. When Wu Liqui and the rest return, we will reorganize and teach that brat a lesson." The person sitting there was actually the leader of the Bilichuan, an expert of the pure spirit realm, the one who changed his name to Bailey Qing. The Bilichuan had just been established not long ago. Although they had already won over many people in the early stages, the other pure spirit realm experts all followed suit and established their own forces. All of a sudden, there was a conflict in terms of recruitment. Especially some high-level spirit cultivators of the spirit gathering realm, they were the focus of competition among several forces. Not long ago, the Bilichuan brought people to recruit a small team of 4. The leader of the team was at the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm, while the rest of the team members were at the 7th and 8th level. They were not weak at all. However, Yushirsi appeared out of nowhere. Yushirsi had also established his own force, called the Yushu clan. He also brought people to recruit that small team. At that time, Bailey Qing did not bring many people with him, but Yushirsi brought a total of 30 people with him. Since he was inferior, Bailey Qing could only take a step back. However, he could not take this lying down. Humph. That Yushirsi is a slippery fellow. His mouth is full of cannons. I really want to tear his mouth apart. Oh right, why is Wu Liqui not back yet? It should be enough time. Blood 51, did something happen to them? The moment the Bilichuan thought of Yushirsi, his entire body was filled with anger. Suddenly, he recalled that the small team he sent out to fetch water had yet to return. Blood 51, who was standing at the side, pondered for a moment before replying, "It shouldn't be." With the strength of their group, even if they encountered a pure spirit realm expert, they would still be able to put up a fight. Furthermore, the rank 1 demonic beast has yet to appear. I really can't imagine what kind of accident could have happened. Hearing this, Bailey Qing nodded in agreement. Right at this moment, a person rushed in from outside. His expression was somewhat flustered, and he was carrying a blood-stained cloth bag in his hand. Captain, it's bad." The moment that person entered, he shouted incoherently. "What do you mean it's bad?" "Captain is doing well." Blood 51 immediately reprimanded. Bailey Qing waved his hand and his gaze landed on the cloth bag. A bad premonition welled up in his heart. "Don't panic. Speak, what happened?" "Captain, when I was patrolling outside, someone suddenly said that he wanted to join the Bilichuan. I took a look and saw that he was only at the 6th level of the spirit gathering realm. I thought that this person did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, so I dismissed him. However, he said that he came with sincerity. He wanted to tell Captain a secret, so he gave me this thing. Inside is. The person stuttered as he spoke. Bailey Qing's expression changed as if he had thought of something. He took a step forward and snatched the cloth bag. When he opened it, he saw that it was Wu Liqui's head. Chapter 27. This is Wu 67. Who is it? Who dares to do this? Who dares to kill a member of the Bilichuan? Blood 51's hair stood on end at the sight of the bloody head. Just a moment ago, he had boasted to Bailey Ching that nothing would go wrong, but now, the head had been tossed in front of him. Would Bailey Ching still trust him in the future? As for Bailey Ching, he didn't make much of a fuss, but his expression was already as dark as water. Even though he didn't yell or scream, he gave off an even more terrifying aura. Go, invite the person who delivered the head in here, Bailey Ching said in a low voice. Yes, it must be related to that person. Don't let him get away. Blood 51 chimed in. Bailey Ching glanced at him, but didn't say anything. However, Blood 51's heart sank, and he cursed himself for losing his composure and speaking out of turn. How could a puny cultivator at the 6th layer of the Spirit Assembly realm kill Wu 67? Furthermore, he didn't act alone, but rather in a team of 7. The person who delivered the message had most likely witnessed the entire process and was here to ask for a reward. A short while later, a skinny young man walked in with a cloth bag in his hand, which was also stained with blood. Bailey Ching's eyes narrowed, and he said, "This is Yen 9, right? No need to say anything else, tell me who did it. From now on, you're my brother, and the Bilichuan will protect you." The man faltered slightly upon hearing this. He didn't think that Bailey Ching would be so straightforward, and the speech he had prepared was completely useless. He couldn't help but feel elated, and he said, as expected of the Bilichuan, "Mu San 30 is impressed. The person who killed our brothers is someone called Ling Shiqi, and he's also at the pure spirit stage." Pure spirit stage. Ling Shiqi. Bailey Ching was first stunned, but then he became a little puzzled. Come to think of it, the person who could kill that group had to be at the pure spirit stage. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do it. However, he had never heard of this Ling Shiqi. As the saying went, people of a certain cultivation level would come into contact with people of similar cultivation levels. Bailey Ching knew that none of the nearby pure spirit stage cultivators by the name of Ling Shiqi. There were only two possibilities. Firstly, this person was not someone who was active in this area. Since they weren't from this area, there shouldn't be any conflicts for the time being. So why would they kill people from the Bilichuan for no reason? Secondly, he had just broken through to the pure spirit realm. However, how could someone who had just broken through to the pure spirit realm possibly annihilate his team of 7? The more he thought about it, the more confused Bailey Ching was. The people around him didn't dare to interrupt his thoughts. They were all waiting for him to speak. Blood 51's shouts had attracted a lot of attention, and they were all waiting for Bailey Ching to make a decision. After a long while, the look in Bailey Ching's eyes changed several times. Finally, he said in a low voice, "Try your best to find out the whereabouts of Ling Shiqi. Anyone who dares to touch my Bailey group must pay the price. However, you must be careful. After all, the other party is in the pure spirit realm. If you discover his whereabouts, don't act rashly and inform me immediately." Yes. 20 to 30 members of the 100-mile group who were in the spirit gathering state responded in unison. "You can leave as well. I'm going to cultivate." Bailey Ching closed his eyes and said without looking at them. Blood 51 naturally knew that Bailey Ching was talking about him. He sighed deeply in his heart, bowed slightly, and walked out. In the past, Bailey Ching had always asked him to guard him when he was cultivating. That was the greatest trust he had for him. Now, that trust was no longer as firm. When Blood 51 walked out of the shed, a hesitant expression appeared on his face. In the end, he stood respectfully at the side of the shed and remained motionless. Ling Shiqi naturally didn't know that his actions had been discovered by the Bilichuan. He had been cultivating wholeheartedly. Because he had only broken through to the pure spirit realm after consuming a spirit fruit, Ling Shiqi was afraid of leaving behind any hidden dangers. Instead, he was constantly refining the spirit qi in his sea of qi. The benefit of the mountain-crushing force cultivation method was reflected in this. It was quite fast in refining spirit qi. Cultivating like this, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these 3 days, even if Ling Shiqi didn't go out, he could feel that the Blood Mist Island was becoming more and more restless. Every once in a while, he could faintly hear the roars of demonic beasts. Those sounds contained quite a bit of spirit qi. It was obvious that they were rank 1 demonic beasts. After the heavenly collapse, the demonic beasts had finally appeared, and they were rank 1 demonic beasts. Ling Shiqi believed that even if he were to fight the blood-spotted leopard alone, he wouldn't have the confidence to win. Then what would happen to the others if they encountered a rank 1 demonic beast? It seems that the number of spirit cultivators on the Blood Mist Island will be reduced again. Ling Shiqi thought to himself. Tick-tock. Ling Shiqi suddenly stood up. Just now, he seemed to have heard a special sound. Tick-tock. Another sound came, and Ling Shiqi confirmed that he didn't hear wrong. His upper body leaned out of the tree hole and looked at the blood-colored light screen in the sky. At this moment, the blood-colored light screen looked incomparably dim, as if a dark cloud had appeared. Dark cloud. It's going to rain. Ling Shiqi muttered in surprise. Rain seemed to be a very normal thing, and there was no need to make a fuss about it. However, ever since he came to the Blood Mist Island for an entire year, it had never rained on the Blood Mist Island. There had never been a change in the weather. Why did it suddenly rain today? Could it be related to the heavenly collapse? Ling Shiqi subconsciously stretched out his hand, wanting to see if it was really raining. Tick-tock. A drop of rain fell on his palm. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi felt a pain in his palm. He hurriedly retracted his palm and looked carefully. At this moment, a small gray spot had appeared on his palm. The spot seemed to be constantly seeping into his flesh and blood, causing the skin on his palm to break open. Hiss! Ling Shiqi stepped back, his face full of shock. His hands had been practicing spiritual techniques for many years in the gray space, and a thick layer of calluses had already grown on them. However, this drop of rain actually broke the skin on his hand. This rain was extremely corrosive. Ling Shiqi hurriedly wrapped his body in a black robe and took out 2 bags to wrap his head. Then, he walked out of the tree hole and quickly broke off the thick branches and leaves beside him to block the entrance of the tree hole. When Ling Shiqi finished doing all this, he took off his black robe and looked at it. There were already 20 to 30 holes of various sizes on it. What would happen if this rain fell on a person's body? Ling Shiqi couldn't help but shiver when he thought of this. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Splash! Not long after, the rain outside became heavier and heavier. Chapter 28. Ling Shiqi, who was hiding, was very glad that he had dug a tree hole immediately after the heavenly collapse. If it was outside, even if you were in the pure spirit realm, even if you had many spiritual techniques. Under such a corrosive rain, if you did not find a place to take shelter in time, it would be difficult to escape death. Heavenly collapse, corrosive rain, rank 1 monster, this series of huge changes is not something that the spirit cultivators in Blood Mist Island can deal with at this stage. This will only cause many people with potential to die in vain. What is the person behind this thinking? Ling Shiqi also could not understand why such a huge change would suddenly occur in Blood Mist Island, catching everyone off guard. Could it be that I was wrong before? Ling Shiqi began to doubt his previous judgment. Perhaps the person behind the scenes was not to nurture talents at all, but this was completely a game. Watching these weak youths die one after another without being able to resist the game. Hearing that the rain outside had become a torrential downpour, Ling Shiqi withdrew his thoughts. No matter how much he thought, it was useless. Only strength was the most important. Ling Shiqi immediately began to cultivate again. Of course, this time, he did not put all of his attention into cultivation, but left a part of his mind to pay attention to the movements outside. The sound of the falling rain seemed to be mixed with some screams. At the same time, he was silently worried about a person. About 4 hours later, the rain stopped. Ling Shiqi did not go out but continued to cultivate. Although the rain had stopped, the rain was still there. It was not until 2 days later that Ling Shiqi carefully pushed aside the branches and leaves at the entrance of the cave and walked out. At this time, he saw a world full of devastation. Although it had experienced a heavenly collapse before, and the nearby trees were crooked, at least it was still lush. However, it had completely turned into a withered land. Looking around, there were plants everywhere that were rotten to the point of being hideous. Wait! Before Ling Shiqi had time to sigh, he suddenly thought of something. After this corrosive rain, won't there be no food and water? In the past, everyone basically ate the wild fruits or stems on these plants for food. After this rain, almost all the plants were corroded to death. What would they eat in the future? There was no need to even mention the source of water. It was unknown just how much corrosive rain had been mixed into it, so who would dare to drink it? The sudden change made it difficult for Ling Shiqi to accept for a while. Even if he had a lot of food and water in his backpack, they would run out one day. What should he do after that? This decaying rain brought them a calamity that was no weaker than the heavens' collapse. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but sigh. He turned to look at his tree hole and frowned. It was precisely because the tree was too big that it was corroded beyond recognition. This time, he hid in the tree hole and survived the corrosive rain, but he might not be able to survive the next one. Looks like it's time to move again, Ling Shiqi said helplessly, then packed up the things in the tree hole and left. There was still a glimmer of hope in his heart, and that was that the rain did not cover the entire Blood Mist Island. Perhaps there were some areas where it was not raining. In that case, there was still room for them to live. Of course, the competition and conflicts would also skyrocket. Ling Shiqi ran in a direction. He decided that even if he had to go around the entire Blood Mist Island, he would find a place to stay. It didn't take long for Ling Shiqi to come across dozens of corpses that were too horrible to look at. There were even a few ordinary demonic beasts amongst them. Ling Shiqi did not care about these, because he had already discovered something strange. There was a blood-colored tower in the center of the Blood Mist Island. This was something that everyone knew. The blood-colored tower was built on top of a small mountain. And that small mountain was still in perfect condition. It was still covered with a dense forest, and large patches of green formed a sharp contrast with the place where Ling Shiqi was. Ling Shiqi sighed in relief. At least there was still food and water. However, the area of this small mountain was not very large. If everyone wanted food and water, they had to go up the mountain, so the possibility of encountering each other was very high. One had to know that demonic beasts also needed to drink water. Now, the danger of collecting food and water had greatly increased, but it was also necessary for survival. Conflicts and fights were inevitable. Ling Shiqi was not too worried as he was a lone ranger. After all, he was still in the pure spirit realm, and he still had the strength to collect food and water. Seeing the mountain, Ling Shiqi suddenly thought of a place, and that place seemed to be a very reliable place to stay. That was the cave where he had joined forces with Delta Origi and Ushirsi to kill the blood-spotted leopard and pluck the spirit fruit. That cave had collapsed during the heavens' collapse. Ordinary people would definitely not be able to enter, but Ling Shiqi might be able to. At this time, Ling Shiqi had an idea. He immediately identified the direction and ran towards the cave in his memory. When Ling Shiqi arrived at the cave, it was already more than 4 hours later. It was not because the distance was too far, but because after the heavens collapse and the corrosive rain, the appearance of the terrain had changed greatly. Ling Shiqi, who had only been here once, searched for a long time before he found this cave. On the way, he also encountered a rank 1 monster. Although the monster was born with rough skin and thick flesh, it was also drenched in the corrosive rain. Its body was full of holes and it looked like it was on the verge of death. However, Ling Shiqi did not beat the dog when it was down. No matter how weak the monster was, it was still a rank 1 monster. It was definitely not as weak as he imagined. In addition, Ling Shiqi still remembered the mutation of the blood-spotted leopard before it died. He did not plan to take the initiative to find trouble with the monster, so he took a detour. At this time, Ling Shiqi looked at the entrance of the cave that was blocked by a huge rock. He rubbed his palms and walked to the entrance of the cave. He pressed his hands on the huge rock, and then the huge rock began to melt like snow under the scorching sun. Not only did it melt, but after it melted, the rock was reshaped. After a while, the huge rock turned into a narrow stone door. However, behind the stone door, there were still pieces of stone. But Ling Shiqi's eyes were filled with surprise, and he thought, it really works. The hand of earth has such a wonderful use. Then Ling Shiqi took 2 steps inside and continued to use the hand of earth to change the shape of the rock. About half an hour later, Ling Shiqi opened up a passageway that could only allow 1 person to pass through. At this moment, Ling Shiqi's face was a little pale. After using the hand of earth for a long time, even if he was in the pure spirit realm, it was a little too much for him. Ling Shiqi returned to the edge of the cave and sealed the cave from the inside. From the outside, it still looked like the cave was blocked by a huge rock. After entering the cave, Ling Shiqi continued to walk inside. When he couldn't go through, he used the hand of earth to create a passage. When the sky fell and the earth cracked, this cave really collapsed. Ling Shiqi recovered his spirit power halfway and came to the deepest part of the cave. This was the place where they fought for the spirit fruit. Chapter 29. What surprised Ling Shiqi the most was that the spirit fruit tree was still alive. It was even emitting a weak light. The cave had collapsed, but it was still intact. Then, he smelled a pungent stench, and there was a hint of burnt smell. It was the smell of Wu Er, the other 2, and the blood-spotted leopard's corpse. Because the cave was sealed, they all gathered here. Ling Shiqi adapted and then muttered to himself. First, he took back the 3 silver needles from the 3 people and then began to get busy. In the next 2 days, Ling Shiqi was busy setting up his home. Now this cave was the best place for Ling Shiqi to stay. If nothing unexpected happened, he would stay here for a long time, so he naturally had to make some arrangements. He also sealed the passage from the entrance of the cave, which was several feet long, and made it into a secret door. If someone accidentally came in from the cave, they would only stay at the outermost area. Further in, he set up quagmires and thorny ropes as traps. If someone found the secret door, they would step into the trap and Ling Shiqi would naturally find out. After passing through here, one would come to the depths of the cave. Inside, there were blood-spotted leopard's corpse and Sunju's bones, as well as broken weapon fragments. If someone came here, they would think that there were people living here before, but then suddenly encountered a monster and everyone died together. The most important thing was that Ling Shiqi completely sealed the area around the spirit fruit tree. This was his real hiding place. Also, he poked a few holes at the top so he didn't have to worry about air. In the end, Ling Shiqi even moved some branches, leaves, and grass from the small hill outside and made a small bed with them. Looking at the small bed that could barely be called a bed, Ling Shiqi laughed. He laughed very happily. Because he hadn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. Ever since he came to Blood Mist Island, he spent most of his nights cultivating, but cultivating couldn't completely replace sleeping. He would only take a nap when he was really tired, and it was a very light sleep because he couldn't calm down. Once he fell into a deep sleep, he might never wake up again. Things were different now. With so many safeguards, he could finally have a good night's sleep. Ling Shiqi gently laid down on the small bed. Suddenly, a wave of fatigue swept over his body. His head tilted, and not long after, he fell into a deep sleep. Unknowingly, the corner of his mouth revealed a faint smile. It turned out that humans could be satisfied so easily. Ling Shiqi slept for almost 2 days. When he woke up, he was absolutely refreshed. His entire body felt relaxed and comfortable. Then, a rumbling sound came from his stomach. Ling Shiqi was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly took out some food and water from his backpack and began to eat and drink. Although he was eating wild fruits and drinking cold water, he was still very satisfied. Ling Shiqi, who had eaten his fill, suddenly had a feeling of wanting more. He shook his head repeatedly to get rid of this absurd thought. Just as he was about to cultivate, a series of rumbling sounds suddenly came from outside the cave. Ling Shiqi's face changed when he heard this. He hurriedly ran out of the cave and saw dozens of different colored lights falling from the sky. It was all kinds of cultivation resources. Ling Shiqi roughly calculated and found that something was wrong. In the past, cultivation resources would only erupt once every half a month. Now, only about 10 days had passed. Moreover, the number of eruptions was a bit more than before. More importantly, there were about a dozen rays of light that were obviously much denser. Needless to say, the things inside were definitely better than the others. So that's how it is. The cultivation resources are given more frequently, in more quantity, and of better quality. If you want to use this method to increase the strength of the spirit cultivators, it will also make the competition more intense. Ling Shiqi muttered to himself, but at the same time, his eyes were not idle. Ling Shiqi clearly knew that he didn't lack cultivation methods or spirit techniques. What he lacked the most was a weapon, and it would be best if it was a sword. The box that flickered with red light contained weapons. He raised his eyes and looked into the distance, quickly locking onto a red light. Moreover, this red light flickered brighter than the others. Time waits for no man. Ling Shiqi immediately rushed towards the location where the red light fell. Ling Shiqi ran at full speed. When he encountered some complicated terrain, he directly used the chaotic footwork to pass through. Although this chaotic footwork was a movement-type spirit technique, it could be used to rush through the journey. It was just that it consumed a lot of spirit chi. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi's current cultivation was at the second level of the pure spirit realm, so he could still withstand it. The reason why he was so anxious was because the faster he arrived, the more he would have the upper hand. Along the way, Ling Shiqi also encountered a few groups of people, but they were all spirit cultivators of the spirit gathering realm. When they saw him, they didn't dare to provoke him and avoided him. When Ling Shiqi's eyes had already seen the box flashing with red light, he was still a step too late. There was already a person standing there, about to pick up the box. At this time, that person also saw Ling Shiqi. When he sensed that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation, his expression changed greatly. He hurriedly picked up the box and ran. As he ran, he shouted loudly, "Sect Master, save me! Sect Master, save me!" I picked up the box. Humph. You're courting death. Ling Shiqi snorted coldly. His feet moved and he quickly approached. The distance between the two was rapidly closing. Just as Ling Shiqi was about to catch up, a blade suddenly slashed out from the side. Ling Shiqi didn't panic. He moved his feet and dodged, but he felt that the blade technique was a little familiar. Ling Shiqi. A familiar voice sounded in his ears. Ling Shiqi looked carefully. The person who made the move was Yushirsi, the person who worked together with him to kill the blood-spotted leopard in the cave. He remembered that the Delta Origi wanted to kill him back then. It was a pity that Yushirsi was still alive when the heaven-collapsing calamity happened. So it's you, Yushirsi. Ling Shiqi said indifferently. However, there was a trace of killing intent in his voice. He had never forgotten that Yushirsi had plotted against him back then. No. Don't call me Yushirsi. It's so unpleasant to hear. Now, my name is Yushu. Yushu. Yushirsi didn't seem to sense Ling Shiqi's killing intent at all. Instead, he tidied his hair and introduced himself in a posture that he thought was very handsome. The corner of Ling Shiqi's eyes couldn't help but twitch. He was speechless. Why is it so popular to change one's name now? Is this a trend started by Bailey Qing? Sect Master. Here, this is something I picked up. I want to offer it to Sect Master. I was almost killed by him. The person who was chased by Ling Shiqi ran to Yushirsi's side and obediently offered the red box. Ha, good. You have a bright future ahead of you to be able to snatch this treasure from the hands of a pure spirit realm expert. When we return, I will reward you well. Yushirsi beamed with joy as he received the box. He didn't place Ling Shiqi in his eyes at all. He even opened the box and took out a sword with a scabbard. Although the sword wasn't unsheathed, one could faintly feel a sharp aura. It was definitely a grade 2 spiritual sword. Chapter 30. When Ling Shiqi saw the grade 2 spirit sword, his heart skipped a beat, but he didn't say anything. Since the item was taken by someone else, then he could only snatch it. Just as he was about to attack, Yushirsi waved his hand and said, Hold it. Brother Lang, don't be agitated. Let's talk things over. But when he saw that Ling Shiqi had no intention of talking nonsense with him, he quickened his pace and said, Brother Lang, you killed quite a few people from Bilichuan, and Bailey Qing is looking for you everywhere. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat, but his expression didn't change as he replied. Brother Lang, stop pretending. You can only blame yourself for being too careless when you killed those people. You didn't even know that someone saw you. A few days ago, someone ran to Bailey Qing to inform him. He's looking everywhere for your whereabouts. So what? What does that have to do with you? Ling Shiqi saw that Yushirsi didn't seem to be lying to him, and there was no need for him to do so. Because the information wasn't true, it was easy to verify. Ling Shiqi could only scold himself for not being careful enough. He didn't notice that there was someone nearby at that time. That's too estranged. No matter what, we have been through life and death together, so there is still some friendship between us. Moreover, I have some enmity with Bailey Qing, and Brother Lang killed his entire team. It can be considered as a serious injury. Recently, he has been suppressed by me, and this is all thanks to Brother Lang. Yushirsi paused for a moment, raised his spirit sword, and continued. If Brother Lang wants this weapon, Yushu should offer it to you. Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes. He naturally didn't believe that Yushirsi would take the initiative to hand it over. There must be something else. As expected, Yushirsi continued, As long as Brother Lang is willing to join my Yushu clan, I will offer the position of vice sect leader and this weapon to you. If we work together, who will be our match in this area? Vice sect leader? Ling Shiqi asked. That's right, Brother Lang, you can consider it carefully. Currently, our Yushu clan has a total of 83 brothers, and 8 of them are at the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm. This level of strength isn't something that Bilichuan and Jet Black Gate can compare to. Yushirsi said proudly. Ling Shiqi was also moved when he heard this. After the series of upheavals on the Blood Fog Island, there were not many people left. He remembered that at the very beginning, there were over 10,000 young men and women who were thrown in. A large number of them died in the beginning, and after about half a year, only half of them were left. In the next half a year, everyone began to form small teams with each other. Fewer people died, but it did not stop. The most serious one was the heavenly collapse. At that time, almost everyone was in the periphery. Those who survived in the end were either strong or lucky. Moreover, there was another decaying rain 2 days ago, and more people died. Ling Shiqi estimated that there would be at most 1,000 or 2,000 people who could survive until the heavenly collapse. Now, Yushirsi was able to gather a force of nearly 100 people. However, Ling Shiqi managed to obtain some information from Yushirsi's words. There should be 3 forces in the vicinity. They were Yushirsi's Yushu clan, Bailey Qing's Bilichuan, and Jet Black Gate. Jet Black Gate doesn't seem to be a name given by the Delta Origi. This means that the Delta Origi's forces aren't in this region. Ling Shiqi thought to himself. Brother Ling, what do you think? Don't worry, if you join the Yushu clan, I won't make any demands on you. From then on, you won't have to worry about food and water. You can just focus on cultivating. I will even try my best to satisfy your needs for cultivation resources. In addition, if you become the deputy sect leader of the Yushu clan, that brat Bailey Qing won't dare to find trouble with you anymore. Yushirsi saw that Ling Shiqi wasn't speaking, so he quickly increased his bargaining chip. However, no matter what he said, Ling Shiqi wouldn't join the Yushu clan. Yushirsi, there's no point in talking so much. I won't join the Yushu clan. You've been delaying for so long because you're waiting for people to come. However, you should know that the more people that come, the more people I can kill. Ling Shiqi said as he pointed his sword at Yushirsi. His entire body became like a sharp sword. Yushirsi's face turned gloomy. One of the people beside him immediately said, Sect leader, you invited him so humbly, but he still doesn't know what's good for him. So what if he's in the pure spirit realm? We have so many people, killing him won't be a problem. Shut up. Idiot. If it's so easy to kill, why would I waste my time talking to him? He cultivates a movement-type spiritual skill. No matter how many spirit-gathering realm cultivators there are, they'll just be there for him to kill. Otherwise, how do you think he wiped out all of Bailey Qing's subordinates? Do you want me to follow in Bailey Qing's footsteps? Yushirsi scolded in a low voice. Then, he continued in a deep voice, besides, he has a very mysterious trump card. It's extremely powerful and even I can't withstand it. He also has a close relationship with that Delta Origi. That lass's influence on the other side is 30% stronger than ours. We can't kill this person. We can't afford to kill him. Then what should we do? Aren't we riding a tiger and having no way to back down now? Are we really going to give him the weapon? It's very likely that the weapon in there is a second-grade weapon. Step aside. I have my own ways. Yes, Yushirsi walked out of the crowd with his dagger. He struck a pose that he thought was dashing and said, Ling Shiqi, I've already said it. Call me Yushu, Yushu. Yushu from Facing the Wind. Forget it, I won't bully you with numbers. Why don't we have a bet? Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows slightly and said, Oh. How and what are we betting? Let's bet with our strength. Let's duel. If you win, the weapon will be yours. If you lose, the weapon will still be yours. However, you must join my Yushu clan. Duel. Ling Shiqi's eyebrows twitched. Ling Shiqi didn't expect Yushirsi to take the initiative to make such a request. Actually, what he was most worried about was that with so many people swarming him, it would be hard for him to kill his way out even if he had a movement technique. But at the same time, even if he was killed, the Yushu clan would suffer heavy losses. At that time, the other two powers would naturally take advantage of the situation. A duel was indeed a good idea. Sure. Ling Shiqi agreed without hesitation. At the same time, his heart was filled with battle intent. He hadn't officially fought with a pure spirit realm expert yet. This time, it was a good opportunity for him to test his strength. Straightforward. Yu Shirsi shouted. Without any hesitation, he slashed down with his dagger. Ling Shiqi was already prepared for it, but he didn't dodge. Instead, he chose to meet force with force. He executed the Whisking Willow swordsmanship entangled with Yu Shirsi. Ling Shiqi knew that Yu Shirsi's dagger skills were fast and his Whisking Willow swordsmanship was also graceful and nimble. Initially, when he used the Whisking Willow swordsmanship, he was on par with Yu Shirsi. But gradually, Yu Shirsi seemed to have adapted to the rhythm of the Whisking Willow swordsmanship and started to gain the upper hand. When the gang members behind Yu Shirsi saw this, they jumped for joy. Words like, "Our sect leader is mighty," and "Our sect leader is invincible," could be heard. Chapter 31. Ling Shiqi, who was in the middle of the battle, was also secretly shocked. Although he had only used the Whisking Willow sword style, his Whisking Willow sword style was at the great perfection stage. Even so, he was still at a disadvantage. It could be seen that Yu Shirsi's strength was not to be underestimated. Yu Shirsi was also shocked. It had only been 10 days since he last saw Ling Shiqi, a mere spirit assembly realm cultivator, had already reached the second level of the pure spirit realm. It seems like Delta Origi gave him quite a lot of spirit fruits. The relationship between the two of them is not ordinary. Yu Shirsi guessed inwardly. However, his attacks were not hindered in the slightest. His blade was very fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already slashed out a blade shadow that was about to envelop Ling Shiqi. However, Ling Shiqi's figure moved continuously, and he forced his way out of the saber's shadows. Not a single saber hit him. It was the confusion footwork. Immediately after, Ling Shiqi stabbed his sword towards Yu Shirsi's throat. Yu Shirsi knew that Ling Shiqi had a movement technique and was already prepared. He cleverly blocked the sword with his short blade. Soon after, Ling Shiqi used the confusion footwork to suppress Yu Shirsi. However, he discovered that Yu Shirsi's blade technique could be used for both offense and defense. It was very exquisite. No wonder he was able to entangle the blood-spotted leopard for so long. Seeing that their gang leader was at a disadvantage, the gang members all shut their mouths. There were even a dozen of them that were slowly closing in on Yu Shirsi. At this moment, Yu Shirsi suddenly stretched his left hand into his bosom as though he wanted to take out something. When Ling Shiqi saw this, his expression changed. Recalling the 3 arrows that injured the blood-spotted leopard, he retracted his attack and dodged to the side. Ha, I've been tricked. Who would have thought that Yu Shirsi's hand was empty? After neutralizing Ling Shiqi's attack, he sent out a palm strike. His palm flashed with traces of golden light, as though it was smeared with a layer of golden powder. With one look, one could tell that it was powerful. Ling Shiqi snorted coldly in his heart. He did not dodge and sent out a punch. This punch looked very ordinary and even Yu Shirsi did not see any clues. Moreover, they didn't pay much attention to it. Because in his impression, Ling Shiqi shouldn't know any fish techniques. Seeing that the other party didn't use his body movement to find an opportunity, and instead fought head-on, he felt that his chances of winning were higher. Boom! However, at the moment when the fist and palm collided, a soft tiger roar suddenly erupted. Yu Shirsi's expression suddenly changed. This was because when Ling Shiqi's seemingly ordinary punch landed on his palm, it suddenly burst forth with an unimaginable power. Yushirsi was unable to withstand the huge impact and was sent flying. And Lang Shichi only took 5 steps back. Yushirsi's palm strike wasn't weak, but he was repelled before he could exert his full strength. Furthermore, Lang Shichi's body was far stronger than ordinary people due to his long practice of spiritual techniques. Thus, he was able to easily deflect the palm strike. Yushirsi adjusted his body in midair and did not fall to the ground. He forcefully suppressed the blood that was about to spurt out from his throat and circulated his spirit chi to raise his uncontrollable left arm. He said calmly, "Brother Lang's fist technique isn't bad, but it's a pity that your mastery is a little lacking." When Lang Shichi saw this, he was slightly stunned. Not only was the Great Perfection Stage Howling Tiger Fist incomparably ferocious, it was also able to restrain the inner strength, achieving a balance of strength and gentleness. This punch landed squarely on Yushirsi, but why did it seem like Yushirsi wasn't injured? However, Lang Shichi immediately noticed that Yushirsi's left arm was trembling slightly and knew that Yushirsi was pretending to be calm. Lang Shichi didn't want to bother about Yushirsi's thoughts and took the opportunity to charge forward. Yushirsi gritted his teeth and also charged forward. But when the two of them approached, he whispered, Brother Lang, please calm down. I've lost, I admit defeat. The weapon is yours, but you can't let me lose too miserably. With so many brothers watching, how am I going to convince them in the future?" Hearing this, even Lang Shichi couldn't wrap his head around it. Isn't there something wrong with Yushirsi's brain? But thinking about it carefully, Yushirsi's actions and words today were very reasonable and could even be said to be the best choice. At the same time, Lang Shichi also felt a little admiration for Yushirsi. For a person to be able to perfectly fuse face and shamelessness together, it was also a great ability. As expected, those who were able to break through to the pure spirit realm in Blood Fog Island weren't simple. But then again, Lang Shichi didn't wish to fight to the death with Yushirsi or the Yushu clan. As long as the other party charged forward, no matter how strong he was, he would still have to suffer a grievance. Thus, he immediately made up his mind. However, he still sent out a punch. When Yushirsi saw that Lang Shichi didn't know what was good for him, he also sent out a punch. This punch contained almost all of his spiritual energy. But this time, when the punch was just a hair's breadth away, Lang Shichi's body suddenly flew out. Lang Shichi fell to the ground in a sorry state with a trace of blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth. He said fiercely, "Damn it, you actually concealed your strength." This time, it was Yushirsi's turn to be dumbfounded. With his shrewdness, he immediately reacted and praised in his heart, "Brother Lang's acting skills are great." The Jade Tree gang members cheered loudly again, waving their flags and shouting battle cries. Soon after, the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. The shadows of swords and sabers flashed continuously, dazzling the eyes of the spectators. There were a few thrilling exchanges that caused the spectators to feel nervous. But only the two of them knew that it was all a show and they didn't really fight to the death. After a quarter of an hour, Yushirsi felt that it was about time and gave a signal with his eyes to withdraw from the battle. He kept his saber and cupped his fists. Brother Lang's strength is indeed extraordinary. I admit defeat. Clan leader Yu's saber technique is exquisite and incomparably fast. If the battle continued, I would definitely be the one to lose. I admit defeat. Lang Shichi shook his head. Ha, Brother Lang is too polite. You and I really don't know each other well. How about we call this a draw? I will hand over the weapon with both hands. Take it as making friends with Brother Lang. Yushirsi said generously. This. Lang Shichi hesitated. Brother Lang, please don't refuse. Otherwise, it will hurt our relationship. Alright then, I will accept the weapon. If the Yushu clan has any difficulties in the future, feel free to look for me. Lang Shichi accepted the spiritual sword and said generously. Brother Lang, please don't think that way. I, Yushu, am not someone who wants favors. There are other cultivation resources nearby that I have to bring my brothers to fight for. Brother Lang, farewell. Farewell. Both parties parted ways. However, not long after Yushursi's group left, someone rushed over and whispered to Yushursi, clan leader, I have already lured Bailey Qing's men over. Very good. Hee, Brother Lang, a grade 2 spiritual sword isn't that easy to obtain. Yushursi smiled proudly. Chapter 32. On the other side, Ling Shichi did not go far and hid behind a withered tree. He carefully took out a piece of talisman paper from his bosom and muttered to himself, in the face of absolute strength, no matter how many tricks you have, they are all useless. The talisman that Ling Shichi took out was the enhancement talisman that he obtained from the lottery. When he placed the enhancement talisman on the sword, the talisman turned into a blue light and entered the sword. Immediately after, the sword began to tremble and flicker with a faint blue light. In less than half an incense's time, the sword returned to normal. Ling Shichi held the sword hilt. With a zang sound, the sword was unsheathed. The sword was slender and the edge of the sword was faintly flickering with a cold light. There were also a few light blue patterns on the sword with spiritual light constantly moving around. Ling Shichi casually drew a few sword flowers and with a sweep of the sword, the withered tree that he was hiding behind was cut in half. It could be said that he was showing off his ability. Ling Shichi's face revealed a look of surprise. One must know that he did not use any spiritual energy at all. It was the sharpness of the sword that cut the withered tree in half. Good sword. As expected of a third-grade spiritual tool. Ling Shichi could not help but praise. At this moment, a few figures walked over from not far away. There's movement over there, let's go take a look. He seemed to be heading in this direction. Everyone, be careful. If it's really Ling Shichi, we just need to delay him. Ling Shichi could not help but frown. After thinking for a moment, he knew that these people were undoubtedly from the 100-mile regiment. As for how they knew of his whereabouts, there was no need to think too much. It was definitely related to Yushursi. Yushursi wanted to use him to clash with the Bilichuan. No matter what the result was, it would be beneficial to Yushursi. Bailey Qing, Yushursi. Ling Shichi whispered. The killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. Immediately, Ling Shichi swaggered out. If it was in the past, Ling Shichi would definitely choose to escape, but now he doesn't want to run anymore. Since Bailey Qing dared to chase after him, then he would beat Bailey Qing until he no longer dared to chase after him. When he walked out, he saw 5 people looking around. When they saw Ling Shichi, they recognized him. One of them immediately ran out, presumably to report the news. The remaining 4 did not approach. Instead, they gathered together and stared at Ling Shichi vigilantly. When Ling Shichi took a step forward, they took a step back. Obviously, they didn't want to fight him. This was because the strongest among the 4 of them was only at the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm. They knew Ling Shichi's strength, so naturally, they wouldn't throw their lives away. Then let's see who's faster, you or me. Ling Shichi's spiritual power began to circulate, and he suddenly accelerated. Coupled with his chaotic steps, he rushed over in a few blinks of an eye. Not good. Run, split up and run. The spirit gathering stage level 9 cultivator turned pale with fright when he saw this and immediately turned to run. One of the 8th level of the spirit gathering realm reacted half a step slower. Just as he was about to escape, Ling Shichi's sword had already pierced towards him. This sword didn't have any sword technique or sword technique. It was just an ordinary stab, but it made that person feel an unusually sharp pressure. Seeing that he couldn't escape, he could only force himself to put his long sword in front of him, trying to block the sword. Unfortunately, when the sword pierced towards him, his long sword only lasted for a breath's time before it broke in the middle. The sword was unstoppable and directly pierced through his body. The huge gap between his cultivation and his weapon made him unable to retaliate at all before he lost his life on the spot. Then, Ling Shiqi caught up to another person and killed him. After that, he didn't chase anymore. This was because the other two ran in completely different directions. He couldn't catch up to them, and there was no need to chase. Ling Shiqi searched through the items on the corpse at his feet. There was a dagger as a weapon. He sold it to the system along with the two long swords he had in reserve before, getting 23 system coins. Only then did he remember that he seemed to have destroyed a weapon just now. What a pity. Then, he strolled around casually. Not long after, a large group of people rushed over and surrounded him. Ling Shiqi roughly estimated that there were about 50 to 60 people. Standing at the very front was a well-built young man. It was the leader of the Bilichuan, Bailey Qing. Blood 51 followed closely behind. Ling Shiqi. Did you kill number 67, Yan Jiao and the others? Bailey Qing got straight to the point. That's right. Since he was already exposed, there was no need to hide it. Ling Shiqi readily admitted it. That's good. Bailey Qing said as he stretched out his hand. Blood 51 immediately came forward and handed over a brown spear. Bailey Qing held the spear and his whole body suddenly became like a beast that had locked onto its prey, ready to attack. Ling Shiqi unsheathed his long sword and the spiritual energy in his body quickly circulated. Even the sword and him were sharp. As soon as the two met, they were like fire and water even before they finished speaking. Bailey Qing's heart became more and more dignified at this time because he found that Ling Shiqi's cultivation was actually at the second level of the pure spirit realm, which was higher than his. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to underestimate his opponent. Before the heavenly collapse, a person who could break through to the pure spirit realm with insufficient spiritual energy was definitely not simple. Moreover, the spear in Bailey Qing's hand was also a second-level spirit weapon. Ha! Bailey Qing shouted in a low voice. He raised his spear and rushed over. Ling Shiqi didn't move. Instead, he took a defensive posture. Bailey Qing was secretly happy when he saw this. The cultivation methods and spiritual skills he cultivated were mainly fierce. Since his opponent chose to defend from the beginning, then he could only wait for his fierce attack. However, when Bailey Qing rushed halfway, his feet suddenly stopped and he stepped on a piece of mud. He lost his balance and fell forward. At this moment, Ling Shiqi moved. He used the confusing footwork and his long sword carried the willow sword style. After a few moves, he arrived in front of Bailey Qing and stabbed down. Captain, be careful. Blood 51 immediately shouted. Then he waved his hand and dozens of people behind him surrounded him. Bailey Qing himself didn't panic in the face of danger. Spiritual energy burst out from under his feet, breaking the mud. He shook his spear and changed from attack to defense, barely blocking the sword. Although he managed to block the attack, he was still at a disadvantage and could only defend himself. Bailey Qing was very depressed. God knew that there would be a small quagmire here. Because of this inconspicuous quagmire, the situation completely changed from what he had imagined. He fell into the passive side of defense. Moreover, Ling Shiqi relied on his movement and swordsmanship and didn't fight him head-on. He was very flexible and changed his direction. The angle of his attacks was more and more tricky, so he couldn't use his spiritual skills. It was very depressing to fight. However, he didn't know that the small quagmire was created by Ling Shiqi using the Hand of Earth. All of this was within his calculations. Chapter 33. During the battle, Ling Shiqi had been suppressing Bai Qing, which made him feel aggrieved. More importantly, Bai Qing gradually realized that several sword marks had appeared on his spear. Although these sword marks were not very deep, Ling Shiqi's sword could easily leave sword marks on his second-stage spiritual weapon. What did this mean? It meant that the quality of his sword must be higher than a second-stage spiritual weapon. Could it be a third-stage spiritual weapon? But how is that possible? Bai Qing was shocked. In the current Blood Mist Island, there were only a handful of second-stage spiritual weapons. Where did this third-stage spiritual weapon come from? Fortunately, Bai Qing's gang members had already surrounded him. He secretly sighed in relief. At this moment, Ling Shiqi stabbed again. Bai Qing habitually used his spear to parry, but this time, a huge force suddenly came from the spear. Bai Qing looked and realized that Ling Shiqi's left hand was holding the spear. His hand was as black as ink, and his inch-long fingernails protruded like a ghost's claw. Ling Shiqi's left hand turned into a ghost jade claw and grabbed the spear, while his right hand held the sword and stabbed straight at Bai Qing's throat. Bai Qing turned his arm, and the spear began to vibrate rapidly. Ling Shiqi immediately felt waves of pain coming from his left hand. Even though the ghost jade claw was at the perfection stage, it was still shaken until a few cracks appeared. However, Ling Shiqi did not want to let go at all. He still stabbed with his sword. Bai Qing's expression finally changed. He underestimated the hardness of the ghost jade claw, and also underestimated Ling Shiqi's determination. Puchi. The sword still stabbed Bai Qing. However, it only stabbed his arm. At the last moment, Bai Qing could only use his arm as a shield. The sword pierced his arm, but because of the obstruction of flesh and bone, it did not stab Bai Qing's throat. Captain. Just as Ling Shiqi stabbed Bai Qing, Sanguine 51 and the others finally arrived. Blood 51 was the first to strike. His two daggers danced through the air in his hands as if he were trying to tear Ling Shiqi to shreds. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to be careless. He was already lucky to be able to injure Bai Qing in such a short time. He hurriedly retreated. However, there were also several Belichuan gang members behind him, and they all used their spiritual techniques to attack him. Ling Shiqi could only force his way out of the battle. However, even though he had perfected the enigmatic footwork, he was still left with a knife mark and a fist mark. Fortunately, the injury was not serious. It was only a superficial wound. However, the people who had injured Ling Shiqi just now had tasted the sweetness of victory and thought that pure spirit realm experts were not so invincible, so they excitedly surrounded Ling Shiqi again. A strong killing intent flashed in Ling Shiqi's eyes, and in the next moment, he entered a wonderful state. He pointed his long sword, and his figure instantly disappeared in front of their eyes. Ling Shiqi flashed through the group of people like a phantom, and then, all 6 of them fell to the ground dead. There was a deep bloody mark on their throats. The chaotic flowers are dazzling the eyes. Killing 6 people with one sword. Seeing that Ling Shiqi had killed 6 people in one move, the originally noisy scene suddenly quieted down. It was so quiet that it was strange. As for the other gang members who were rushing over, they all stopped in their tracks with dull faces. The whole scene looked a little funny. How long had it been since they surrounded and killed Ling Shiqi? Bai Qing's arm was stabbed in a few rounds, and 6 gang members were killed in one move. These were not 6 pigs, but 6 spirit cultivators above the 7th level of the spirit gathering realm. For a moment, no one dared to come forward. Then, everyone looked at Bai Qing, and their meaning was obvious. At this moment, even Bai Qing was a little shocked. At the same time, he finally understood how number 67, Yan Zhou, and the others died. Facing such an opponent, with such a powerful spiritual technique, it was no wonder that none of them survived. Bailey Qing was very clear that even if it was him, he would have to spend a lot of energy to kill the 6 people just now. After all, if they really couldn't win, they could run separately, and wouldn't foolishly fight with their lives on the line. Looking at Ling Shiqi's calm and composed appearance, this move didn't seem to consume much energy. Bailey Qing was already regretting it in his heart. If the two of them fought to the death, he knew that he was inferior to Ling Shiqi, and he didn't have the confidence to dodge that move. Not to mention those spirit-gathering realm subordinates, they didn't have the strength to fight back at all. If everyone surrounded and killed him, they might be able to fight to the death, but how many subordinates would he lose? One had to know that the Yushu clan and Jet Black sect were nearby. When the time came, they would definitely hit him while he was down, and his Bilichuan would not be far from being destroyed. If he couldn't win in a one-on-one battle, he might be able to win in a group battle, but the price he would have to pay was too great. What should he do? Captain. His move looked so terrifying, but it must have consumed a lot of spirit energy. Right now, he's just pretending to be calm to intimidate us. Let our brothers attack together, we can definitely kill him. Blood 51 said coldly. When Bailey Qing heard this, he glanced at him in annoyance and said, "Look at his aura, and the spirit light on his sword. How does it look like he's running out of spirit energy? Fight? Use the lives of our brothers to fight him to death." Do you think the Yushu clan and Jet Black sect are all dead people? This. Blood 51 was instantly speechless. He lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything else. Bailey Qing's expression became even more gloomy. At this moment, Ling Shiqi was not in a hurry. He was at the second layer of the pure spirit realm, so the chaotic blossom's gradually bewildering eyes only consumed less than 30% of his spirit energy, so it wasn't a lot. Furthermore, because this move was created by him, he was able to use it with ease. Just now, because he was facing a spirit cultivator of the spirit assembly realm, he had used half of his strength and thrust it out 6 times. That was why the 6 of them only had their throats slit and not their heads cut off. This was the benefit of self-created moves. They weren't fixed, but could be changed and adjusted at any time. If he had learned a spirit technique created by someone else, he definitely wouldn't have been able to do this. The reason he wasn't in a hurry was because he believed that this move would definitely intimidate Bailey Qing. He wanted to let Bailey Qing know how stupid it was to surround and kill him, Ling Shiqi. In truth, Ling Shiqi didn't have any thoughts of killing Bailey Qing. He wasn't arrogant enough to take the head of an enemy general while surrounded by dozens of people. His goal was to intimidate. With the strength of one person, he could intimidate an entire force. Bailey Qing's current situation was somewhat similar to Yushursi's. It was difficult to stop halfway. Facing an opponent like Ling Shiqi, it was impossible to fight him alone, and it was also impossible to surround him. However, Ling Shiqi had killed more than 10 of their people. This kind of enmity couldn't be forgotten. Otherwise, who would join his Bilichuan in the future? Difficult. Bailey Qing's heart was in a difficult situation and he was starting to have a headache. At this moment, Ling Shiqi swung his sword, causing the blood on the sword to splatter. Then, he pointed his sword and the surrounding Bilichuan hurriedly took 2 steps back. Seeing this scene, Bailey Qing's face darkened. At this moment, Ling Shiqi spoke. Chapter 34. Ling Shiqi was surrounded by dozens of people, but he was not afraid. Instead, he raised his sword and said, "If all of you come at me together, I will definitely die. However, at least half of you will accompany me to the Yellow Springs." "That person, is it you, or is it you?" Ling Shiqi said as he pointed his sword at a person. The people who were pointed at by him all moved away in fear. Moreover, the Yushu clan left not long ago. "I heard that the Mahisht clan is nearby. What do you think they will do?" Ling Shiqi continued. Bailey Qing's face was gloomy, but he could not think of a solution. Roar, just as he was struggling, several loud roars sounded. Moreover, from the sound, it was not far from them. Everyone's expression changed when they heard the sound, because it must be a rank 1 demonic beast that could make such a sound. At this time, a figure hurriedly ran into the crowd. What's going on? Bailey Qing shouted. It's the Mahisht clan. They encountered a rank 1 demonic beast and are retreating. The person said while panting. Bailey Qing's face showed a surprised expression, but he was secretly happy. Firstly, the Mahisht clan encountered a rank 1 demonic beast and would definitely be injured. Secondly, it gave him a way out. Ling Shiqi, you encountered a rank 1 demonic beast. Today, you are lucky. I, Bailey Qing, will take back the debt you owe in the future. Brothers, retreat. Bailey Qing waved his hand and quickly led everyone to retreat. The speed of their retreat was really fast. Bailey Qing, who was retreating, suddenly realized that this Ling Shiqi was so similar to a rank 1 demonic beast. He could not defeat him alone. He could defeat a group of people, but he would suffer heavy casualties. This was simply a demonic beast in human form. Ling Shiqi, on the other hand, laughed secretly and ran in another direction. This result was not bad, and it would prevent him from fighting with the Bilichuan. However, he did not run for long before he stopped. Because there was a demonic beast walking slowly in front of him. This demonic beast was shaped like an ape. Its body was not very big, only about the height of a human. Its 2 long forelimbs were covered with ferocious barbs, which made people shudder in fear. When the demonic beast saw Ling Shiqi, its eyes were filled with blood and it rushed over. Ling Shiqi's heart sank. At the same time, he felt helpless. It was one thing for 2 first-rank demonic beasts to appear at the same time today, but he was just casually walking around and bumped into them. His luck was really too bad. Ling Shiqi sighed helplessly. He had no choice but to escape. Speaking of which, if Ling Shiqi used his full strength, he still had a chance to kill this monster, but there was no need to. Even if he could kill this demonic beast, he would still be injured and consume a large amount of spirit qi. One must know that the surrounding area was filled with people from 3 different powers. The Bilichuan was already his mortal enemy, and the Yushu clan also had enmity with him. If he encountered people from these 2 powers in his heavily injured state, Bailey Qing and Yushursi would not mind sending him on his way. Even if it was the jet black sect that he had not come into contact with, they would still eliminate this potential threat. He could only run. 1 man and 1 beast ran just like that. Ling Shiqi realized that the demonic beast was not very fast, but it was not slow either. It kept following him closely. In the process, they even met a few people, but the demonic beast did not even look at them and just chased after him. Ling Shiqi also did not understand. Was it not good to chase after a spirit-gathering realm cultivator? Why did it have to chase after him, a pure spirit realm cultivator? After chasing for so long, it still could not catch up. Could it not be flexible? Of course, he did not know what the demonic beast was thinking. He could only run forward. Gradually, the terrain began to become unfamiliar. He had already run out of the familiar area and his spirit qi was also gradually depleting. The situation was getting worse. Ling Shiqi's heart was already filled with killing intent. During this period of time, he had not met anyone else. This meant that there were very few people in this area. Even if he was injured, no one would notice. The demonic beast's 4 limbs quickly skimmed across the wet ground and continued to chase after Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi checked the spirit qi in his body. Previously, he had fought with Yushursi and Bailey Qing and used chaotic blossom intoxication. Now, he only had about 50% of his spirit chi left. Humph. Ling Shiqi hardened his heart and took out a pack of spirit-returning powder and swallowed it. His sharp sword was suddenly unsheathed and a cold sword ray streaked across the air. The demonic beast was still chasing after him. Ling Shiqi suddenly turned around and slashed at the demonic beast's left arm. A third-level spirit weapon was abnormally sharp, but even so, the sword only left a deep wound on the demonic beast's left arm. Roar, roar, roar. The demonic beast was injured and its ferocious forelimbs were crazily waving about. Ling Shiqi dodged and was inwardly shocked. He had used his strongest strength in the previous attack. He originally thought that he could use the sharpness of the third-level spirit weapon to cut off one of the demonic beast's arms. The demonic beast looked ordinary except for its two forearms. If he could cut off one of them, his battle strength would be greatly reduced. But he did not expect its arms to be so tough. Next, the man and the demonic beast engaged in an intense battle. The demonic beast's speed was not outstanding, but it was abnormally agile in battle. Especially when it waved its arms, it was impossible to get close to it. Even Roaring Tiger Fist and Ghost Jade Claw could not be used. Ling Shiqi's confusion footwork, which was at the perfection stage, was also not slow. In fact, he was even slightly faster than the demonic beast, but he could only use his sword to attack. The number of sword wounds on the demonic beast's body increased and blood flowed out continuously. But Ling Shiqi was not having a good time either. At this moment, although he was not injured, the spirit chi in his body had been rapidly consumed. If he dragged on, once his spirit chi ran out, he would die without a doubt. Roar! The demonic beast kept roaring and waving its ferocious arms like wheels. There were many wounds on its body, but they were not fatal. Instead, they made the demonic beast even more ferocious. Ding ding! The demonic beast's arms suddenly smashed down. But this time, Ling Shiqi did not dodge. Instead, he held his long sword horizontally and blocked the attack. The sword and the demonic beast's arms drew dazzling sparks. At the same time, Ling Shiqi's feet sank deeply into the soil. The barbs on the demonic beast's arms were only an inch away from his face. Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed. He opened his mouth and suddenly let out a horrifying roar. The sound even wrapped in the air, forming an invisible wave of air that spread out. It was the perfection stage sound shockwave. Ling Shiqi had not used the sound shockwave ever since he mastered it. He did not even use it against Yu Shixi and Bailey Qing. This was his trump card, a trump card that could win by surprise. Chapter 35. At this moment, Ling Shiqi's unexpected sound wave caused the ape-shaped monster to bleed from its 7 orifices. It even froze in place for a moment. Ling Shiqi hurriedly withdrew and quickly adjusted his spirit energy and aura, entering a strange state. In the next moment, a few afterimages flashed past the ape-shaped monster with a sharp sword light. Then, the ape-shaped monster's body fell, and a monster head rolled to the side. Huff huff. Ling Shiqi's body was unstable, and he half knelt on the ground, barely supporting himself with the sword in his hand, and began to gasp for breath. At this moment, his spirit energy was almost exhausted, his face was pale, and his entire upper body was already soaked in sweat. However, his eyes still turned and stared at the monster's corpse, and when he found that the monster did not mutate like the blood leopard before it died, he was relieved. However, he did not dare to stay here any longer. The sound wave just now was too loud, and if it attracted other monsters or other spirit cultivators, he would definitely die. Ling Shiqi forced himself up and walked to the monster's side. With a raise of his arm, the monster's corpse disappeared without a trace. Only the bloodstains on the ground seemed to prove that it had existed, and Ling Shiqi's system had an extra 18 system coins. Ling Shiqi looked around and hesitated, because the fog here was already very thick, and he could not find the direction he came from. However, Ling Shiqi was not in a hurry. As long as he slowly found the monster's footprints, he would definitely go back in the opposite direction. Relatively speaking, what he needed more now was to recover his spirit energy. After walking for a while, Ling Shiqi squatted down, pressed his hands on the ground, and used the last trace of spirit energy in his body to use the hand of the earth, and his whole body gradually sank into the ground. Opening up an extremely narrow space underground, Ling Shiqi closed his eyes to recover his spirit energy. After an unknown period of time, Ling Shiqi finally recovered his spirit energy. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and found that the spirit energy in his body had faintly increased. However, he didn't go out. Instead, he opened his arms and expanded the underground space a little. It could probably accommodate 2 or 3 people. Then, he opened the system and prepared to draw the lottery. Previously, he had obtained a total of 18 system coins from killing the ape-shaped mystical beast. In addition to the remaining 3 points, he had a total of 21 system coins, which was just enough for 2 draws. The reason for this was that the Ling Shiqi urgently needed the ability to face a rank 1 monster head-on. Today, he first fought with Yu Shixi and Bai Li Qing, 2 pure spirit realm experts. Although neither side used their full strength in these 2 battles, Ling Shiqi was confident enough to defeat his opponent. If he wanted to kill her, he would probably have to use his sonic shockwave and alluring flowers. He wasn't afraid of fighting with others. No matter if it was the bewildering footwork, willow sword style, ghost jade claw, or howling tiger fist, they were all sharp weapons to defend against enemies. Coupled with a rank 3 spirit artifact, he was absolutely not afraid of ordinary pure spirit realm experts. But on the Blood Fog Island, the threat of demonic beasts might be even greater. Especially demonic beasts with ranks. When dealing with these demonic beasts, there were very few methods that could be used. For example, the ape-shaped mystical beast's arms were full of barbs. When it waved its arms, its speed and power were terrifying. Even if Ling Shiqi had the perfect stage ghost jade claw and howling tiger fist, it was useless. How could a mortal body fight a demonic beast's body head-on? However, the willow sword style was nimble, but lacking in power. When combined with the bewildering footwork, it was enough to injure the monster, but it couldn't deal a fatal blow. Alluring flowers was Ling Shiqi's trump card. It consumed a lot of spirit energy, so naturally, he couldn't use it casually. Therefore, when dealing with demonic beasts, Ling Shiqi didn't have it that easy. He realized that he currently lacked powerful spiritual techniques that could be used head-on. The resource eruption had just passed, so he could only place his hopes on the system. Of course, this hope wasn't very big. He opened the system and selected the elementary lottery. Begin. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the elementary prize, Carved Magic Crow. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the elementary prize, a pair of cloth shoes. Looking at the 2 extra items in front of him, Ling Shiqi directly picked up the card. He still remembered that the lightning arrow he drew last time saved his life, and because of it, he obtained the spirit fruit to break through to the pure spirit stage. It could be said that the lightning arrow card was the key to him having enough strength to deter a force. This card was definitely a good thing. Picking up the card, there was a purple crow drawn on the front. Its claws were abnormally sharp, and its eyes were fierce. It looked ferocious at first glance. There was also a description on the side: summon the magic crow for you to command until death. This, summon a life form. This system is getting more and more incredible. Let's give it a try. Ling Shiqi muttered to himself, then injected spirit energy. The card suddenly turned into a golden light, and then the golden light dissipated, and a purple crow the size of a head flew out. However, this place was very small, and the crow couldn't fly anywhere. Ling Shiqi waved his hand, and the crow obediently landed on his arm. Ling Shiqi carefully observed the crow and found that its appearance was the same as in the painting just now, but at this time, the crow's eyes were lifeless, and it didn't seem to be a living creature. He found that there was a connection between him and the crow, and he could command it at any time, but it didn't have its own independent thought. It was a bit like a robot, only knowing to follow orders. So that's how it is. Ling Shiqi nodded. This situation made Ling Shiqi feel a little relieved. If he really summoned a living creature, he really didn't dare to use it at ease. And feeling the aura emitted by the crow, it was a genuine rank 1 monster. Ling Shiqi was very satisfied with having such a powerful combat force at his disposal. It's just that I still need to find an opportunity to test the crow's specific combat power. I can't always call you a crow, you'll be called Ziyu. Ling Shiqi gently patted Ziyu's head, and with a shake of his arm, Ziyu landed on his shoulder. At this time, Ling Shiqi's gaze fell on another prize, a pair of cloth shoes. Forget it, it's better than nothing, at least it can be used. Ling Shiqi kicked off the shoes he made with leaves and weeds, and put on the cloth shoes, feeling that they fit his feet quite well. All in all, Ling Shiqi was still very satisfied with this lottery draw. With an additional powerful combat power, he would have a stronger foundation to stand on. The hope of surviving on this blood fog island increased by a bit. Just as Ling Shiqi was about to go back, he suddenly felt a very slight vibration. It was so slight that it could be ignored, and at first he even thought it was an illusion. But then there was another vibration. Ling Shiqi subconsciously raised his head. He guessed that there might be a large monster moving on the ground nearby. However, after a few more vibrations, Ling Shiqi was surprised to find that the source of the vibrations didn't come from the ground. Instead, it came from underground. In fact, the vibrations were even more frequent. Chapter 36. Sensing the unusual movement, Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes, and his eyes flashed. Finally, he pressed his hands against the air, and his whole body began to sink. Judging from the appearance of the spirit fruit last time, there were still some natural treasures on this blood fog island. The phenomenon at this moment might also be the birth of a rare treasure. Now that his spiritual power had been restored and he had the purple feather, it was worth exploring. His body continued to sink underground, and his vision was pitch black. Ling Shiqi was also constantly adjusting his direction. Now, he felt that the vibration was getting stronger and stronger. Moreover, he could vaguely hear the sound of roaring. After about half an hour, the frequency of the vibration decreased, but the roaring sound became more and more frequent. As the depth continued to increase, Ling Shiqi could hear it more clearly. It seemed to be the sound of a demonic beast, but this sound was full of fear and pain. Further down, the roaring sound turned into a wail. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi stopped. Through the feedback of the soil, he would fall down a little bit more. This meant that there was still a space underground. At this time, it was almost as if they were separated by a wall. The sound below could be heard very clearly. It was indeed the sound of a demonic beast wailing. However, what could make a demonic beast so frightened? Just as Ling Shiqi was feeling bewildered, he vaguely heard the sound of a conversation. "Someone's here." Ling Shiqi immediately held his breath and carefully poked a finger-sized hole with the hand of earth. Then, he could hear the voice more clearly. "Zhuo Lao Gui. Can you be a little quieter? The surrounding formation is damaged, and I have to waste time repairing it." A voice full of energy and exasperation sounded. "Oh. Meng Wanshan, you've come at the right time. Take a look at this old man's new masterpiece." It was a dry and hoarse voice. "You've been working for several days, and this is what you've come up with. It's neither a demonic beast nor a ghost. What do you know? This is a blood beast formed by the fusion of two demonic beasts. There are not many people in the blood beast sect who can make such a thing. Is that so? Then it would be a great loss for the blood beast sect to lose a grandmaster like you. What a laughable bunch of stubborn people. They're still holding on to ancient books from hundreds of years ago and don't know how to be flexible at all. If this continues, how many generations can the blood beast sect continue to be passed down? A traitor like you who has already been expelled from the blood beast sect is still worried about the future of the sect. Did you come here just to mock this old man? The voice suddenly turned cold. Shualaogue, you and I are already dead. Now that we are under the control of others, we can be considered as grasshoppers on the same rope. I don't want to be your enemy. But you'd better restrain yourself. You can torment your blood fiends, but don't make me deal with your tail. Bah, no. Even if I broke a few corners of the formation, why are you so stingy? It won't take much time to repair the formation, but do you know that what they want the most right now is stability? Although the unforeseen event some time ago was expected, the losses caused were still too great. It's not like you don't know how many people died because of this. I don't want to attract their attention because of the commotion you caused in the area I'm in charge of. Do you understand? In the end, you're still afraid of death. Don't worry, if my blood fiends succeed, it will definitely be a great merit. At that time, our area will be basking in my glory. Is that so? What do you mean by your blood fiends? Forget it, I'm in a good mood today, so there's no harm in telling you. When the blood fiend's condition stabilizes, I'll let them fuse with the blood malicious bead. Don't worry, the fusion of the blood malicious bead is very smooth now, and it won't go berserk anymore. The space within Blood Fog Island is too unstable to accommodate the life forms of rank 3 demonic beasts. I'll combine 2 rank 2 demonic beasts and refine them into twin blood fiends. After fusing with the blood malicious bead, their combat power will definitely be stronger than that of a rank 3 demonic beast. However, its life form is still a rank 2 demonic beast. This will solve a very troublesome problem for them in the future. Don't you think it's a great merit? Wonderful. Wonderful. Shualaogue, you're really something. Perhaps the blood beast sect really made the wrong decision to expel you back then. That's because their conversation came to an abrupt end. In the next instant, an astonishingly huge aura surged out along with a shocking roar. What was even more frightening was that 2 even more frightening spiritual energy fluctuations immediately followed. After only a few breaths of time, the outside calmed down again. Didn't you just say that it won't go berserk anymore? This voice was filled with irritable anger. Cough cough, I just said that fusing with the blood malicious bead won't go berserk anymore, but I didn't say that fusing with the twin blood fiends wouldn't. I'm going to repair the formation first. I can't be bothered to waste my breath with you. You'd better hope that they don't notice this place. Otherwise, just the negligence alone is enough for you and me to die several times over. Then there was a series of hurried footsteps. Tisk, it's hard for someone as timid as a mouse to accomplish great things. What exactly went wrong this time? Think again, think again. After a long while, there was no more sound. Ling Shiqi finally dared to relax. Only then did he realize that his whole body was already soaked in sweat. The conversation between the two of them contained too much shocking information. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. For a moment, even Ling Shiqi felt his head buzzing, and his head hurt. After a long while, Ling Shiqi wiped the sweat from his face and muttered to himself, "It seems that my previous guess was correct. There really is someone secretly controlling Blood Mist Island. And we're just pawns to be manipulated." Ling Shiqi's eyes flickered. It was an opportunity for him to come here by accident, and he didn't want to go back like this. Immediately, Ling Shiqi used the hand of earth to open a hole as thick as an arm, and then immediately sealed it. A purple crow flew out of the sky. Ling Shiqi sent Ziyu out to investigate, while he continued to hide. Although Ziyu didn't have a true consciousness, Ling Shiqi ordered him to return immediately if he found any living creatures. If there wasn't any, he would fly back in 30 minutes. Ling Shiqi digested the shocking information while counting the time. After the time for an entire incense stick to burn, Ziyu returned. He took a deep breath, adjusted his state, and then opened the hole and jumped down. Suddenly, a strong smell of blood hit his face. Ling Shiqi used his spiritual power to control his legs, and when he landed, he didn't make a sound. After landing, he immediately looked around and found that there was no one else. This place wasn't very big, and there were colorful formations and restrictions everywhere. Waves of strong spiritual power were constantly emitted, and there were several passages that were as tall as a person that led to unknown places. Then his eyes fell on a large piece of flesh not far away. It was the twin blood fiend that Zhuo Gue said had suddenly gone berserk. Chapter 37. Ling Shiqi endured the nauseating smell and quickly ran over. When he got closer, he saw that there were two terrifying wounds on the demonic beast's body. One was at the heart. It was unknown what had pierced through the heart, but the wound was as thick as a pillar. The other was at the head. At this time, the demonic beast's head was already a mess. It looked like it had been cut by countless sharp blades. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi thought of the two shocking fluctuations of spirit energy. He didn't know how strong the two people who had just spoken and attacked were. However, Ling Shiqi didn't care about this. He waved his hand and a line of translucent words appeared in front of him. The price is 106 system coins. Do you want to sell? Yes. Ling Shiqi's face couldn't help but show a touch of joy. The value of this demonic beast's body was far beyond his expectations. Then, the large piece of flesh disappeared without a trace. Ling Shiqi planned to leave at this time. To be able to pick up such a big bargain was already a big profit. However, when he saw the narrow passages around him, he had other thoughts. If you don't go crazy, you won't survive. Ling Shiqi made up his mind and walked into the nearest passage. The passage was very narrow, but it wasn't dark. Ling Shiqi walked for a long time and didn't find any danger. Instead, he found a room. With a wave of his arm, Ziyu, who had been standing on Ling Shiqi's shoulder, immediately flapped its wings and flew into the room. He leaned against the wall, and the hand of the earth was always ready. If there was any movement, it would immediately merge with the wall. After a few seconds, Ziyu flew back. Ling Shiqi knew that there was no one inside, so he quickly went into the room. As soon as he entered the room, he saw a mess. The room wasn't big. It was filled with several tall bookshelves. There were many books, scrolls, and the like, but they were all messed up. In the middle of the room, there was a desk half the height of a person. On top of it was a mess of scrolls. Ling Shiqi hurriedly stepped forward and went directly to the desk. He didn't dare to flip through the books. Looking carefully, he found that these books were just ordinary books that recorded some information, and they were basically related to demon beasts. As he looked around, Ling Shiqi's body suddenly froze. Because a message suddenly appeared in front of his eyes, Rank 3 skill discovered, Beast Demon Destruction Technique, incomplete. Do you wish to learn it? 2 skill points will be consumed. 3rd stage cultivation technique. Ling Shiqi was pleasantly surprised. He lowered his head to take a look. He didn't know which book was the cultivation technique, but he didn't dare to touch it carelessly. He could only choose, yes. In the next moment, Ling Shiqi's consciousness was pulled into the gray space. Ling Shiqi had been in the gray space many times, but he had always come in to cultivate spiritual techniques. This time, he was cultivating techniques. That's not right. I didn't enter the gray space when I was practicing the mountain-shattering force. Why was I pulled in this time? Is it because the system has been upgraded? Ling Shiqi suddenly felt that something was wrong, but he didn't have time to think about it. His body had already moved on its own. Ling Shiqi hurriedly collected his thoughts and went to experience the cultivation technique. When Ling Shiqi reached the beginner level of the Beast Demon Destruction Technique, his consciousness was thrown out. The moment his consciousness returned to his body, Ling Shiqi suddenly felt an extremely dangerous feeling, which made his back turn cold. Ling Shiqi didn't even look back. He used the confusion steps and moved half a foot away. Just as he was about to teleport away, a slender red snake pounced on him. Rank 1 Demon Beast. Ling Shiqi was already sweating at this moment. He thought to himself, that was close. If he was a moment later, he would have been ambushed. If he was ambushed by a rank 1 Demon Beast, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. When the red snake's attack failed, it immediately arched its body like a bow, ready to shoot a fatal arrow at any time. Ling Shiqi didn't want to fight the red snake here. Although he had the help of the rank 1 demon beast, Ziyu, it was too dangerous here. If he attracted the attention of the room's owner, even 10 of him wouldn't be enough to kill him. Whoosh! He unsheathed the rank 3 spiritual sword. The red snake seemed to feel the threat of the spiritual sword, and its body leaned back a little. Next, Ling Shiqi swung his hand, and 5 silver needles shot out. The red snake seemed to be intelligent and nimbly dodged them. Taking this opportunity, Ling Shiqi ran away. A rank 3 technique and more than 100 system coins. It could be said that he had made a lot of money this time. Naturally, it was best to run now. As soon as he left the room, Ling Shiqi wanted to go back the way he came, but he didn't expect to hear footsteps coming from that direction. Ling Shiqi had no choice but to run in the opposite direction. At the same time, he channeled spiritual power into his feet and didn't dare to make any sound. Behind him, the little red snake followed him like a shadow, constantly making hissing sounds. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi was not slow, and the red snake couldn't catch up for a while. Ling Shiqi ran as fast as he could and kept looking up. But the more he looked, the colder his heart became. This was because the top of the passage was covered with formations and restrictions. Although he didn't know what these formations were, he couldn't run into them head-on, and there was no way for him to return to the surface. What was even more frightening was that Ling Shiqi realized that he was almost at the end of the passage. This was a dead end. Ling Shiqi's mind buzzed and he was a little confused. He immediately shook his head, forced himself to calm down, and looked up. Got it. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi realized that there was an area above where there were no formations. Although it was only a small area, it was enough to accommodate him. There was a light at the end of the tunnel. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to delay. He bent his legs and then jumped up. Like a fish jumping into a pool, he disappeared into the wall above. The red snake also stopped. It witnessed everything, but it didn't seem to understand and could only circle around anxiously. On the other side, at the entrance of the passage, there was an old man who didn't have much hair on his head, but he still had a messy hairstyle. He slowly walked over and muttered something. Little red flower, you're being naughty again. How many times have I told you not to touch my book? When he walked into the room, his originally turbid eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp gaze, and his entire aura also underwent an earth-shattering change in an instant. The spiritual power around him swirled, and there was even a blood-red light. He stretched out his hand and 5 needles flew over, and he caught them with 2 fingers. They were the 5 silver needles that Ling Shiqi shot out before. Someone's here. The old man's eyes widened slightly, and he immediately went to the table. He pulled out an old book with sketches on it, and secretly sighed in relief. Meng Wanshan is a piece of trash. He calls himself a formation master, but he didn't even know that someone had come in. Fortunately, this old man's 10 years of hard work is still here, or else I would have fought you to the death. After the old man finished speaking, he took out something that looked like a waste token, and with a surge of spiritual power, the waste token exploded. Then, the whole area shone brightly, and all the formations and restrictions were activated. Chapter 38. Ever since Lang Shiqi drilled into the ground, he used the hand of earth with all his strength to continue rising. He estimated that he would be able to return to the surface in about half an hour. However, at this moment, Lang Shiqi suddenly felt that the surrounding soil was rapidly hardening. The speed of his ascent suddenly slowed down, and the soil's hardness became higher and higher. At the same time, several formations and restrictions of different colors suddenly appeared. The closest one was 2 inches in front of Lang Shiqi. A terrifying aura rushed towards him, causing him to hold his breath. The sudden change caught Lang Shiqi a little off guard. The Hand of Earth's magical effect had always been the reason he dared to explore, but at this moment, the Hand of Earth could not help him. Because there were already formations around him, and the spiritual power fluctuations were all terrifying. He believed that he would definitely die if he touched them. At this moment, Lang Shiqi forced himself to calm down and carefully looked for a way to escape. The surrounding soil had become very hard. He could not melt it even with the Hand of Earth's full strength. In other words, he was trapped here. Fortunately, although the formations were terrifying, they did not show any signs of expanding. Lang Shiqi sighed and felt relieved. At least for now, as long as he did not move, his life was not in danger. After thinking for a while, Lang Shiqi really could not think of a way. He simply sat down and called out the system interface. Lang Shiqi could only count on the system lottery now. Looking at the 107 system coins in the system, he could even draw 10 times in a row. Maybe he could really get something that could solve his current predicament. Beginner lottery, 10 times, begin. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Broken Emerald, embedding material. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Mission Card, randomly accept beginner missions. Different levels of rewards will be given according to the degree of completion. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Jade Hairpin. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Smoke Stone. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Colored Glass Cup. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Special Bone Flute. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Poison, Heart-Destroying Pill. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, Long Beard Vine, Refining Material. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the elementary prize, Dark Gold Mask. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the primary prize, Chakra Walk. Looking at these prizes, Lang Shiqi's eyes twitched. There were very few practical things, and more importantly, none of them could help him get out of his current predicament. Although Lang Shiqi didn't have much hope in his heart before, he couldn't help but sigh at this moment. He then began to count the prizes one by one. Lang Shiqi piled the most useless ones together. The broken emerald and the long beard vine were both materials for refining weapons, but no one on the Blood Fog Island knew how to refine weapons, so these 2 items were the most useless. The broken emerald was a little better as it could be carried around, but the long beard vine could only be thrown away. He picked up the special bone flute and played with it for a while, then threw it aside. Was he going to play a song for the enemy if he kept it? The lapis lazuli was a delicate lamp. Lang Shiqi thought about it and threw it away. No matter how delicate it was it couldn't be carried around, and the system backpack was very tight. Naturally, he couldn't carry such useless things. Then Ling Shiqi picked up the black gold mask and looked at it first. This mask didn't cover the whole face, but the mouth was exposed. It didn't look special. Ling Shiqi put the mask on his face. It felt good to the touch, so he didn't take it off. The jade hairpin was a very common emerald green hairpin. Ling Shiqi pondered for a moment and put it in his arms. Then Ling Shiqi's face became more dignified. He picked up a palm-sized white card with the words "Mission Card" written on it. After thinking for a while, he put the card in the system backpack. Naturally, this mission couldn't be started right now. If the mission had a time limit or something, it would be terrible. This was a good thing, and he had to keep it safe. The smoke stone was a gray stone. Smashing it would release a large amount of smoke in an instant. It was similar to the smoke bombs in his previous life. It was a treasure for escaping. Putting the smoke stone in his waist, Ling Shiqi picked up a dark green bottle with the words "Heartwrecking Pill" engraved on it. When he opened the cap, he immediately smelled an unbearable stench. Ling Shiqi immediately covered his mouth and nose and thought to himself, this poison doesn't even need to take effect to kill people directly. Then he turned the bottle upside down, and 2 pills, one black and one white, slipped out. The black pill was the heart-wrecking pill. After taking it, the heart would beat violently every once in a while, and every time, it would beat more and more violently until the heart exploded and died. The white pill was the antidote to the heart-wrecking pill. Staring at the 2 pills, Ling Shiqi nodded slightly. This thing was a good way to threaten and control people. Finally, Ling Shiqi's eyes fell on the chakra walk. This prize was not something like a book, but a small light blue energy body. When Ling Shiqi's hand touched it, the energy body turned into a blue light and drilled into his eyebrows, and then a prompt appeared in front of his eyes. Boom! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a special spiritual technique, Chakra Walk, Entry Level Plus, huh? Entry Level. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but wonder. In the past, when he obtained spiritual techniques, he went to the gray space, but this time he didn't. What's even more strange is that Ling Shiqi didn't feel any change in himself at all. What's going on? Ling Shiqi frowned and began to recall the information about Chakra Walk. This spiritual technique is obviously from a famous anime world in his previous life. Chakra Walk, to be precise, is not a ninjutsu or spiritual technique. It is actually a fine control of the energy in one's body. The stronger the control, the faster the learning, and the smoother the use. In this world, it is essentially the control of spiritual power. Ling Shiqi's cultivation is now at the 2nd level of the pure spirit realm. The pure spirit realm is the process of polishing spiritual power, and the control of spiritual power has gradually improved in the process of cultivation. In fact, Ling Shiqi's spiritual power control system has basically reached the entry level of Chakra Walk, so he didn't feel any change. Immediately, Ling Shiqi directly opened the system and clicked the plus sign behind Chakra Walk. Entry, Proficiency, Small Success, Deshang, Great Perfection. When Chakra Walk was promoted to the Great Perfection realm, Ling Shiqi could clearly feel that the spiritual power in his body was more flexible and delicate. He raised his palm and moved his spiritual power, and a faint aura suddenly appeared in his palm. Then, the aura began to change, first gradually forming a circle, then a triangle, a pentagon, and other shapes. But more complex shapes can't be done, but Ling Shiqi nodded with satisfaction. Chapter 39. Ling Shiqi was quite satisfied with this chakra walking technique. In addition to accumulating spiritual power, the pure spirit realm also requires continuous polishing of spiritual power. Now that his control of spiritual power has greatly improved, the polishing of spiritual power is also more efficient. Apart from that, the usage of all spiritual techniques would become even more exquisite. This small chakra walking technique has unknowingly increased the speed and strength of Ling Shiqi's cultivation. However, it is still useless in the current predicament. Ling Shiqi sighed faintly. Forget it, since I can't get out for the time being, I'll just wait. The materials stored in the system backpack are enough to support me for 2 or 3 months. This place is full of formations and restrictions, and it looks dangerous. But at the same time, it is also full of rich spiritual energy, even richer than the spiritual energy on the ground. It is better to use this place to cultivate for a while. Then Ling Shiqi gathered his thoughts and prepared to cultivate the new technique, Beast Demon Destruction Technique. To be able to cultivate in such a dangerous place, Ling Shiqi's heart was really big. But not long after, Ling Shiqi opened his eyes again, and there was a hint of joy in his eyes. Because he found that although he cultivated Beast Demon Destruction Technique, the previous technique, Mountain Breaking Energy, was also there. This was different from what he knew. In his memory, if he cultivated a new cultivation method, he would have to change his previous cultivation method. However, at this moment, the two techniques coexisted in Ling Shiqi's body. The biggest advantage of this is that the cultivation speed will be faster, and the characteristics of the two techniques will be combined. As for Ling Shiqi's first cultivation technique, Spirit Energy Art, to put it nicely, it is called a technique, but to put it bluntly, it is actually a method to draw spiritual energy into the body. It is not a technique at all. Maybe it is because of the existence of the system, but it is a good thing. Ling Shiqi murmured, and then entered the state of cultivation. This cultivation session lasted for almost a month, in the underground space. Meng Wanshan, who was in charge of setting up and maintaining the formation, was currently kneeling behind a figure. The man wore a blood-red robe with lifelike evil face ghosts embroidered on his collar and cuffs. He was holding a scroll and silently flipping through it. Meng Wanshan had been kneeling for a long time. His entire back was soaked in sweat, but he didn't dare to move. After a long time, the man put down the file in his hand. The file fell to the ground with a soft sound. However, this tiny sound was like a sudden clap of thunder to Meng Wanshan, causing him to shudder. Meng Wanshan, you are very good. That person said indifferently. There was not a trace of emotion in his tone. However, Meng Wanshan felt an almost tangible spiritual pressure pressing down on him like a mountain. Everything your subordinate has done is for the safety of the Blood Mist Island. Lord Hua Luiyue is wise. Meng Wanshan seemed to have used up all his strength to finish this sentence. After saying it, he looked even more exhausted. Enlightened. This is the enlightened one. Hua Luiyue turned around and revealed a mask. On it was a picture of flowers blooming under the moonlight. He walked past Meng Wanshan and patted him on the shoulder before leaving. At first, Meng Wanshan was very puzzled. He found it hard to believe that the other party had let him go so easily. Who would have thought that in the next moment, his body would gradually melt like a pile of mud? Meng Wanshan couldn't even scream because he no longer had a mouth. He only had a terrified expression as he finally turned into a pile of mud. Hua Luiyue walked out of the room. There were 5 people waiting at the door with their backs slightly bent. Shuo Laogue was among them. When they saw him come out, the 5 immediately knelt down and shouted, Lord Hua Luiyue. Close the formation. There will be no next time. Hua Luiyue left behind a sentence and disappeared in a flash. The remaining few people remained kneeling on the ground, not daring to move. After a long time, they finally heaved a sigh of relief. They stood up and wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads. Another life saved. Tisk, you're already dead. Why are you still so afraid of death? Enough. Close the formation. You still have the time to bicker. But what about the person who broke in? Idiot. We've activated so many formations this time. We haven't found the person who broke in for more than a month. Do you know how much resources we've lost? Besides, to the big shots above, we don't have to care too much about this little rat. Disperse. The 5 of them dispersed. From the beginning to the end, no one mentioned Mang Wanshan. On the other side, Ling Shiqi was still cultivating day after day. In the first few days, he would often stop to check if there were any changes to the formations and restrictions. Later, he simply couldn't be bothered. Other than eating, he focused all his attention on cultivating. In a situation where he was surrounded by formations and restrictions, he still took the opportunity to absorb a large amount of spiritual energy to cultivate. Ling Shiqi's method was crazy. Until one day, Ling Shiqi, who was immersed in cultivation, noticed that the originally abundant spiritual energy had suddenly become thin. Ling Shiqi opened his eyes and saw that the restrictions around him were gradually dimming. After a few breaths, they disappeared without a trace. He raised his hands and felt that the earth was rapidly softening. He made a prompt decision. His spiritual energy at the peak of the 3rd level of the pure spirit realm burst forth, and he used the hand of earth to quickly rush upwards. Blood Mist Island, Stone Forest. 2 youths at the 8th level of the spirit gathering realm were wandering around in boredom. Feng Qi, what's the point of patrolling here? Who doesn't know that this area is our Supreme Society's territory? Who would dare to barge in? One of the short-haired youths said with a slightly arrogant tone, picking his teeth with his little finger. Be content, Mu 21. At least there's no danger patrolling here. It's better than having us gather resources. It's not like you don't know that of the 10 people who went to the mountain last time, only 5 came back. The person beside him continued. Tisk, they're just unlucky to run into people from the Blood Moon. Alright, let's not talk about it. I'm going to relieve myself. Mu 21 turned behind a strange rock nearby, took off his pants and was about to go to the toilet. All of a sudden. Bang! A loud sound rang out. The ground in front of Mu 21 burst open, lifting up a large amount of soil and throwing it at him. A black shadow shot up into the sky from the middle. Mu 21's eyes were a little dazed as he stared blankly at the black shadow making a beautiful turn in midair, and then slowly landing on the ground. That person was draped in a shabby black robe, and wore a dark golden mask on his face. There was even a ferocious crow perched on his shoulder. He looked like an evil spirit that had crawled out from the depths of hell. Oh, oh. Mu 21 couldn't help but shudder, and a foul stench instantly flowed out from below. Ling Shiqi really didn't notice that there was someone here when he rushed out with all his might, because most of Mu 21's body was covered in soil. When Ling Shiqi landed on the ground, he smelled an indescribable stench, but before he could look around, he heard a loud shout. Who's there? Such a loud commotion naturally attracted Feng Qi's attention, and he immediately shouted. Chapter 40. Feng 7 looked at the mysterious masked man in front of him and felt that he was not someone to be trifled with. More importantly, he could not sense his cultivation level at all, so he must be in the pure spirit realm. Feng 7 first saluted with his fists, but said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Who are you? Why did you suddenly appear in the Supreme Society's territory? He even purposely emphasized the words, Supreme Assembly. Supreme Society. Ling Shiqi's eyes were slightly doubtful, then he looked around and found that this place was a stone forest. But because of the corrosive rain, these stones were all bumpy and looked a little strange and scary. He had never been to this place before, in other words, this was no longer the area he was originally in. Feng 7 saw that Ling Shiqi was ignoring him, so he immediately asked, this is, boom. But Ling Shiqi did not give him a chance to speak at all. He took a few steps and flashed to Feng 7's side, instantly grabbing Feng 7's neck. Feng 7's momentum did not decrease, and he directly crashed into a strange stone behind him. Cough. Feng 7 almost couldn't breathe, he only felt extreme pain all over his body, his whole back felt like it was falling apart, and he could not help but cough out a mouthful of blood. I ask, you answer, you can live, understand. Ling Shiqi's cold voice rang in Feng 7's ears. Feng 7 could not move his body, he could only frantically blink his eyes, showing an extremely strong desire to live. Since the catastrophe, how many times have the cultivation resources erupted? 4 times. Ling Shiqi was stunned, he had lost track of time after being underground for so long, he did not expect that more than 30 days had passed. I actually missed 3 chances to fight for resources. Ling Shiqi secretly lamented. Have you heard of the Yushu clan, Bilichuan, and Jet Black sect? He continued to ask. No. How many forces are there in this area, and how strong are they? There are only 2 forces in this area, our Supreme Society and Blood Moon. Our president is at the 3rd level of the Pure Spirit Realm, and there are 2 other spirit cultivators at the Pure Spirit Realm. As for Blood Moon, they also have 3 Pure Spirit Realm cultivators, but their leader is at the 4th level of the Pure Spirit Realm, so they have always been suppressing us. Hearing these words, Ling Shiqi felt a sense of urgency in his heart. Only a little more than a month had passed, and Pure Spirit Realm experts had appeared one after another. Not to mention this, the most surprising thing was that someone had actually broken through to the 4th layer of the Pure Spirit Realm. Others might not be very clear about the difficulty of breaking through from the 3rd level of the Pure Spirit Realm to the 4th level, but Ling Shiqi was very clear about it. In fact, about 10 days ago, Ling Shiqi was already at the peak of the 3rd level of Pure Spirit Realm, but even after cultivating for 10 days under the condition of abundant spiritual qi, he was still unable to break through to the 4th level. Every major realm of cultivation had 9 minor realms, and every 3 minor realms was a barrier. In the first 3 levels of the Pure Spirit Realm, in addition to accumulating spiritual qi, one also had to constantly polish spiritual qi to make it purer. But in Blood Mist Island, the pressure was really great, and even if Ling Shiqi cultivated spiritual qi with all his might, he did not refine it very carefully. If he wanted to break through the barrier of the 4th level, he had to have enough spiritual qi. So during this period of time, Ling Shiqi had been polishing spiritual qi, but he estimated that he would have to continue cultivating for 8 or 9 days before he could break through. At this time, Feng Qi, whose neck was still firmly held by a hand, saw that the other seemed to be lost in thought, and his mind immediately became active. Of course, it was not the thought of courting death. The gap in strength was there, and he was still very self-aware. He connected the questions that Ling Shiqi asked, and guessed that this person was most likely not active in this area, and Ling Shiqi was obviously an expert of the Pure Spirit Realm. If he could pull him into the Supreme Union, wouldn't it be enough to suppress Blood Moon? That would naturally be a great merit for him. Cough, this brother, sir. I think you should join the Supreme Union. Our president will definitely invite you with a lot of money, martial arts, spiritual skills, weapons, you can choose. Feng Qi said, but found that the other party did not seem to be interested. Instead, his eyes revealed a bit of cold killing intent, which made Feng Qi subconsciously shut his mouth. Ling Shiqi was definitely not willing to join a force. Next, he just wanted to steadily break through to the 4th level of the Pure Spirit Realm, and then see if he could find his original place. After all, he spent a lot of effort on that cave, and it was indeed very safe. It would be very difficult to find such a place to stay. As for the 2 people in front of him, Ling Shiqi did have some killing intent, but after thinking about it, it seemed that there was no need. First of all, there was no conflict between them, and rashly killing them would implicate the Supreme Union's hatred. Moreover, with the increase of his cultivation, a cultivator at the 8th level of the spirit-gathering realm could be killed with a flip of his hand, and there was indeed no threat. Finally, Ling Shiqi was not a bloodthirsty person. Big brother, you can really consider joining the Supreme Union. When the time comes, we can catch Blood Moon off guard, kill the Delta Origi, and occupy the Stone Forest. Feng Qi clearly felt that Ling Shiqi's killing intent was slowly dissipating, and he continued to persuade Ling Shiqi. When Ling Shiqi heard the two words, Delta Origi, a strange look flashed across his eyes, and he coldly shouted, "What did you just say?" "What did I say?" Feng Qi did not immediately react. "I mean, you've convinced me." "Ah." Half an hour later, Ling Shiqi and the other two arrived at the Supreme Union's location. It was still the stone forest, but the stones formed a circle, and the stones were connected by branches, forming a small camp. There were more than a dozen simple tents of different sizes in the camp, and many figures could be seen walking back and forth, roughly 70 to 80 people. The three of them walked to the gate, and when the gatekeeper saw Ling Shiqi, a stranger, he immediately stepped forward to stop them. Feng Qi hurriedly went forward and whispered, and the few of them even glanced at Ling Shiqi from time to time. "Let's report to the president, it's too dangerous to let a pure spirit realm cultivator in." "All right." Then, one of them quickly ran in, and rushed straight to the largest tent in the center of the camp. Feng Qi came back with a smile, and wanted to explain to Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi did not care, and instead glanced at Mu-21 who had been hanging at the back. At this time, his gaze was a little dull, and his body was still covered in mud, and when he got closer, he could faintly smell a strange smell. Shaking his head, Ling Shiqi did not care about him anymore. At this time, a few people hurriedly walked over, and the leader was a 13 or 14-year-old youth, with a hypocritical smile on his face. This person was the president of the Supreme Union, GE, who later created a force and changed his name to Ji Tianyi. Ji Tianyi walked out of the gate, and the first thing he sensed was Ling Shiqi's aura. Pure Spirit Realm Level 3. Ji Tianyi was delighted, and smiled. "This one is the president of the Supreme Union, Ji Tianyi. How should I address you, brother?" "Dark Crow," Ling Shiqi said lightly. Chapter 41. Ji Tianyi saw that the other party was wearing a black robe and a mask, with a purple crow perched on his shoulder. "So it's Brother Dark Crow. I've heard from my brothers that Brother Dark Crow intends to join our Supreme Society. If that's true, this one welcomes you with open arms. However, Brother Dark Crow's position in the society will depend on how capable you are." Ji Tianyi's body surged with battle intent. Ling Shiqi heard this, but did not say anything. He reached out his right hand, palm up, and made a hooking motion. The smile on Ji Tianyi's face disappeared, and he clenched his fists. With a roar, he rushed forward, his fist seemingly tearing through the air. Wave-breaking fist. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi also punched out, but his fist looked ordinary. Seeing this, the members of the Supreme Union behind him began to buzz in discussion. "Who do you think will win?" "Nonsense, of course it's the president." "That's right, the president's wave-breaking fist is a level 2 spiritual technique that he got not long ago. Look at that Dark Crow, his fist doesn't have any momentum at all. I'm afraid he'll be crippled by the president's punch. Is this really the pure spirit realm?" At this moment, even Feng Qi couldn't help but have some doubts in his heart. However, the moment the two fists collided, Ling Shiqi's fist suddenly exploded with a fierce tiger's roar. The two fists collided solidly, but neither of them took half a step back. Suddenly, an invisible wave of air shook around them, blowing up the dust on the ground. Then, the two of them tacitly stopped. What pure spiritual energy! Ji Tianyi clasped his fist and praised. What a powerful fish technique! Ling Shiqi replied. Ha ha ha, Brother Dark Crow is one of us from now on. Please come in. Ji Tianyi laughed, and made a please gesture. Feng Qi told me that as long as I agree to join the Supreme Society, I can choose any technique, spiritual technique, or weapon. I don't know if that's true. Of course it's true. Ling Shiqi nodded his head and walked in confidently. By the time everyone recovered from their shock, they had already entered the tent. At this moment, there were also people who noticed that Mu-21 seemed to be a little off, but the moment they got close, they smelled an indescribable smell, so no one asked further. In the big tent, the few of them exchanged greetings for a while. They were also testing Ling Shiqi's background bit by bit. But he had always been a man of few words, so he didn't get anything useful out of him. After a while, Great Heavens waved his hand and the others left, leaving only the two of them in the tent. Brother Dark Crow, your cultivation and strength are extraordinary. In fact, you aren't any weaker than me. Originally, the position of vice president was supposed to be yours. But as you know, if you were to become the vice leader right after joining the Supreme Society, I'm afraid there would be some who wouldn't accept it. Great Heavens said with a fake smile. It doesn't matter. If there's a chance, I'll show my worth. I wonder if I can see what I deserve. Of course. Brother Dark Crow, please wait a moment. Great Heavens saw that Ling Shiqi didn't seem to have much intention of fighting for power. He was delighted and clapped his hands. Then two people came in, each holding a box. One box was big, the other small. Putting the boxes on the ground, the two of them left. Brother Dark Crow, please take a look. Great Heavens opened the big box. There were a total of 4 weapons inside, a saber, a sword, a dagger, and an axe. They were all grade 2 spiritual artifacts. The small box contained basic books. There were 2 cultivation methods and 4 spiritual techniques. Unfortunately, they were all only grade 1. May I take a closer look? Ling Shiqi casually picked up a cultivation method, flipped to a page and said flatly. Of course. Brother Dark Crow, please do as you please. Great Heavens sat down, picked up a cup of water and drank slowly. Ling Shiqi snickered inwardly. A line of words that others couldn't see appeared before his eyes. Discovered grade 1 cultivation method, record of wind. Learn. Consume 1 skill point. Yes. After 2 breaths, Ling Shiqi frowned slightly. This time, he cultivated a grade 1 cultivation method, but found that the increase was minimal. Seems like I already have a grade 3 cultivation method. Cultivating these grade 1 techniques is useless. He thought to himself. As for the other cultivation method, he just picked it up for show and didn't cultivate it anymore. Looking at the 4 spiritual techniques, they were Breaking Gold Blade, Vine Grappling Hand, Wind Finger, and Centipede Curse. Every time Ling Shiqi picked up a spiritual technique, he would seriously look at it a few times. In reality, he used his unlimited skill points to secretly learn it. When he saw the last one, Centipede Curse, he paused for a moment. This is a spiritual technique. In this world, people who could sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and absorb it into their body were collectively known as spirit cultivators. The path of spirit cultivators had been through the baptism of time and could be said to be very complete. However, that didn't mean that all spirit cultivators walked the same path. In fact, the path of spirit cultivators today could be divided into martial artists and spirit sorcerers. It was just that more than 90% of the spirit cultivators were martial artists, so many people equated the two of them. The main reason was because there were too few spirit sorcerers. In order to become a martial artist, one must be able to sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, in order to become a spirit sorcerer, on top of that, one must have an extraordinary amount of spiritual energy. Therefore, spirit sorcerers were very rare. Spiritual techniques were also very rare. The centipede curse in Ling Shiqi's hand was a spiritual technique. After briefly flipping through it, he realized that it wasn't a spiritual technique that directly attacked. Instead, it planted a centipede curse on the enemy's body, causing unbearable pain and itchiness, as if there really was a centipede in the enemy's body. In the end, the enemy would even scratch their own body and die from festering. I wonder how my spiritual energy is, if I can cultivate spiritual techniques. Ling Shiqi thought to himself. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a system notification appeared in front of him. Level 1 Spiritual Technique, Centipede Curse, discovered. Would you like to learn it? 1 skill point required. Yes. Ling Shiqi was slightly delighted. However, he immediately put on a straight face and said angrily, "What is the meaning of this, President Ji?" "Oh. May I know what made Brother Dark Crow unhappy?" Ji Tianyi made a very exaggerated, confused expression. President Ji already knows the answer to your question. These spiritual techniques are all level 1, and there's even a non-offensive spiritual technique like the divine entanglement. Furthermore, there's even a spiritual technique. Is President Ji joking? Ji Tianyi walked over to take a look and his expression immediately changed. He said loudly, "There's such a thing. My subordinates have not done their job well, please forgive them." However, even though these spiritual techniques are level 1, Brother Dark Crow should know how precious level 2 spiritual techniques are. Brother Dark Crow has just entered the Supreme Assembly. If he really gets a level 2 spiritual technique, I'm afraid he'll be criticized. Moreover, these weapons are genuine grade 2 weapons. In terms of value, they are not inferior to cultivation methods or spiritual techniques. Chapter 42. Ling Shiqi looked at Ji Tianyi quietly, listening to him speak. After a moment of silence, he said, "Then President Ji will have to give me a chance to act. Don't worry, our Supreme Society will make a big move in 6 days. Brother Dark Crow, you are the most important link. If you succeed, you will be the Vice President of the Supreme Society, and you will be free to choose any of our techniques. I hope President Ji won't go back on his word." "Of course not. Brother Dark Crow, rest well for the next few days. I will have Feng 7 serve you. If you need anything, just tell him directly." Ji Tianyi saw that Ling Shiqi had relented, and took the opportunity to ask him to leave. Ling Shiqi nodded slightly, picked up his steel sword, Record of the Wind, and gold cleaving strike and turned to leave. When he reached the door, Feng 7 was waiting for him. "Lord Dark Crow, please follow me." The two walked into a small tent. Feng 7 wanted to say something, but was sent away by Ling Shiqi, and only told to send some food on time. Ling Shiqi sat cross-legged on a wooden stool, thinking about how Ji Tianyi established the Supreme Society. His personality and conduct did not seem like the leader of a faction at all. He even wanted to write the word "use" on his face. Even if it was the way to control his subordinates, it was still too childish. Shaking his head, Ling Shiqi did not want to think about it. He did not really join the Supreme Society, but only to return a favor. He also got a few decent techniques and a second-level spiritual weapon. After that, Ling Shiqi summoned the system and cultivated all the spiritual skills that he had stolen to the Great Perfection realm. Then, he looked at his own information, name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation, Third level of Pure Spirit Realm Techniques, First level technique, Mountain Shattering Force, First level technique, Record of the Wind, Third level technique, Demonic Beast Breaking Technique, Bloodline. Techniques, Unranked Technique, Triple Water Ripple Palm, Perfection. First level technique, Enigmatic Footwork, Perfection. First stage Spiritual Technique, Brushing Willow Sword Style, Great Perfection. First stage Spiritual Skill, Ghost Jade Claw, Consummation. First stage Spiritual Skill, Howling Tiger Fist, Consummation. First stage Spiritual Skill, Sonic Shockwave, Great Perfection. First stage Spiritual Skill, Gold Breaking Single Strike, Great Perfection. First stage Spiritual Technique, Vine. Grappling Hand, has reached perfection. First stage Spiritual Technique, Windward Finger, Consummation. First stage Spiritual Technique, Centipede Incantation, has reached perfection. Special Spiritual Technique, Hand of the Earth, Great Perfection. Special Spiritual Technique, Chakra Walk Technique, Great Perfection. System Coins, 7. Lang Shichi nodded silently. At this stage, spiritual techniques that were not ranked were almost useless. Now that he had 4 level 1 spiritual skills, his strength had indeed improved by a step. Next, Lang Shichi began to temper the spiritual energy in his body, striving to break through to the 4th level of the pure spirit realm as soon as possible. Of course, he did not put all of his attention into it. He was still paying attention to the outside world. On Extreme Heaven's Will's side. Right after Lang Shichi left, 2 people came in, both of them were in the pure spirit realm. Red Cloud, Wenlu, Sit. Ji Tianyi seemed to have known that these 2 would come. The 2 of them looked at each other and sat down. President, how strong is that dark crow? Very strong. In terms of the purity of spiritual energy, I am inferior to him. Moreover, he used a level 1 spiritual skill to fight evenly with my wave-breaking fist. It can be seen that his spiritual skill has been cultivated to an extremely high level. Wenlu, you are not his opponent. Ji Tianyi's expression darkened slightly, and said pointedly. On the side, Red Cloud said, President, I think this person is quite strange. Can we trust him? Trust him or not? Of course not. His origin is indeed a bit strange. I heard from Feng Qi that he did not even know how many times the cultivation resources erupted after the natural disaster. However, because of this, he definitely has nothing to do with Blood Moon. After all, it is a force that appeared after the natural disaster. I have already hinted to him with my attitude before that our extreme will only have a relationship with him. If he wants to get a level 2 spiritual skill, he must do his best. Therefore, no matter how strong he is only a hired thug. There is no way he can become a vice president. Ji Tianyi said while secretly observing the 2's expressions. Seeing that they were indeed relieved, he nodded. All right, you 2 go do your work. Prepare well for the operation in 6 days. This time, there is no room for failure. Ji Tianyi waved his hand, and the 2 left. At this moment, Ji Tianyi was the only one left in the tent. He muttered to himself in a low voice, I can still suppress these 2, but if that crow really wants to, I won't be able to suppress him. So, I can only apologize. 5 days later, Lang Shichi was invited to the big tent. At this time, there were already 3 people inside. They were Ji Tianyi, Wenlu, and Red Cloud, the 3 strongest members of the Extreme Will Association. Seeing this, Lang Shichi more or less knew what was going on. The 4 of them first exchanged some pleasantries, and then Ji Tianyi said seriously, the 3 of you, tomorrow is the time for the cultivation resources to erupt. It is also our chance to deal a heavy blow to Blood Moon. Tomorrow, our Supreme Will Association will move out in full force. Let's split into 2 groups. One group will be led by Red Cloud and me. We will fight for resources as usual, and will definitely cause friction with Blood Moon and attract their attention. The other group will be led by Wenlu. We will take the risk of going around the mountains and behind Blood Moon, attacking them from both sides. Even so, it will not be enough to deal a heavy blow to Blood Moon. Brother Dark Crow, you are the most important. Understood. Before the opponent's pure spirit realm makes a move, I will only show my spirit-gathering strength. Ling Shiqi said calmly. It is refreshing to deal with smart people. When the time comes, don't leave me, Brother Dark Crow. When the time is right, you and I will work together to kill Mufong. Mufong. Isn't the leader of Blood Moon called Delta Orgi? Ling Shiqi heard, and his heart moved slightly. Brother Dark Crow, you may not know, but I have fought Delta Orgi several times. Let me put it this way. If she was still at the 3rd level of the pure spirit realm, you and I might have a chance of killing her if we work together. But now that she is at the 4th level of the pure spirit realm, the chances of us ambushing her are very small. At most, we will injure her. At that time, not only will we expose you, Brother Dark Crow, we will also not be able to deal a substantial blow to Blood Moon. Ji Tianyi sighed faintly and explained. He was also very envious of the cultivation talent of Blood Moon's leader, Delta Orgi. So, it is better to break one finger than to injure all 10, Ling Shiqi continued. That's right. Call me when we move out. Also, don't forget your promise. With that, Ling Shiqi stood up and left. One day later, at night. At this time, the Supreme Will Society's camp was solemn. Everyone was slightly raising their heads, as if waiting for something. Soon after. Bang! A huge sound rang out. With the blood-colored tower as the center, dozens of colorful streaks of light shot out in all directions. At this time, no one spoke, but it could be faintly felt that many people's breathing had become heavier. Ji Tianyi waved his hand, and nearly 100 people quickly walked out of the camp like fish. Then, they split into 2 groups and quickly ran in different directions. Chapter 43. In the crowd, Ling Shiqi was not far behind Ji Tianyi. His black robe didn't seem so strange in the dim environment. Fighting for resources was a very normal thing on Blood Mist Island. To the Supreme Society and Blood Moon, the 2 factions that resided in this stone forest, fighting was already a common occurrence. So today, the 2 forces were still fighting fiercely everywhere and didn't feel anything wrong. In the end, a large number of people from both sides gathered together to fight for a box that shone with golden light. As everyone knew, the box with golden light contained a cultivation method. Cultivation methods were the foundation of cultivation. More importantly, this ball of golden light was more intense than anything they had ever seen before. In the dim environment, it was so dazzling. The 2 forces added up to 100 people gathered together, 100 pairs of eyes staring at the golden light on the ground. Ji Tianyi and Red Cloud stood at the front of the Supreme Society. Blood Moon also had 2 people, a man and a woman, both of whom were in the pure spirit realm. But Delta Orgi wasn't there. Seeing this, Ji Tianyi was half happy and half worried. Without Delta Orgi, he could smoothly kill Mufong according to the plan. But at the same time, a person at the 4th level of the pure spirit realm was a huge variable. He couldn't find her whereabouts and felt uneasy. Ji Tianyi, since everyone wants this cultivation method, let's follow the old rules and make a bet. The leader of Blood Moon's group, a young man in green, said. Where's Delta Orgi? Let her come. Ji Tianyi looked at the young man in disdain and said with a disdainful tone. You think you're worthy to fight the Moon Lord? The young man's expression turned slightly crazy when he heard this and pointed at Ji Tianyi angrily. Ji Tianyi's face darkened. I'll return those words to you. You're not worthy to fight me. Get lost. You. Ah Chin. The young man was furious and wanted to say something, but was stopped by the girl beside him. "Don't be rash. Something's wrong," the girl whispered. "What's wrong?" Chen was stunned. "Look at the members of the Supreme Society. Their eyes are shining, and their fighting spirit is high. It doesn't seem to be just about cultivation methods. I'll hold him back and wait for the Moon Master to arrive so that he won't cause any trouble." The girl took a step forward, and the spiritual energy in her body began to circulate rapidly. She raised her head and said, "President Ji, do I have the qualifications? The second layer of the pure spirit realm. When? Great heavens will sense Mu Feng's spiritual energy fluctuations and was secretly shocked. The other party had actually broken through to the second level. Today's plan would not be so easy. At this moment, he regretted not giving Leng Shiqi a rank 2 spiritual skill back then. I couldn't ask for more. Fight! Great heavens will suddenly shouted. Then, all the members of the Supreme Class Society shouted one word in unison, "Fight." Then, several dozen people swarmed forward, catching Blood Moon off guard. Extreme heavens will, what is the meaning of this? Mu Feng's eyes widened in anger. After a long period of fighting, the two forces had gradually formed a tacit rule. It was just ordinary resources. Everyone fought for it based on their own ability. If an unusually precious resource appeared, each side would send out a few people to fight, and the winner would get it. This way, many unnecessary casualties were avoided. However, this time, the Supreme Society suddenly broke the rule, and Blood Moon's people did not react in time. In the blink of an eye, several people were killed or injured. But they immediately reacted, and hundreds of people began to fight fiercely in this stone forest. And among the pure spirit realm cultivators, Red Cloud went for Chen. Great heavens will personally dealt with Mu Feng. Great heavens will put on a pair of silver fingerless gloves on his hands. The shadows of his fists were powerful, and after a few moves, Mu Feng was suppressed. Mu Feng held a thin sword in his hand, and his swordsmanship was exquisite. But after all, his cultivation was a level lower, and he could only retreat. Great heavens will, do you know what a stupid decision you've made? When the Moon Lord arrives, it will be the time of your death. Mu Feng turned around and forced Great Heavens will to retreat, and said angrily. You should worry about yourself first. So what if Delta Origi is at the 4th level of the pure spirit realm? She can't be stronger than me. She can't kill me. Great Heavens Will's face was somewhat sinister, and said fiercely, at the same time, he threw another punch. Good, well said. But I'll return the same words to you. You're only at the 3rd level of the pure spirit realm, how can you be stronger than me? You can't kill me either. I just need to drag it out until the Moon Lord returns. Let's see how you deal with this. Then let's see if you can drag it out until Delta Origi returns. Wave-breaking fist. Great Heavens will roared, and his fists released light, wrapping the air and attacking Mu Feng. Mu Feng held the thin sword horizontally, and then slowly rotated it. Every time it rotated, the spirit energy on the sword became stronger. She was concentrating, doing her best to prepare to block Great Heavens Will's move. However, at this moment, a black shadow rushed out from the crowd and leaped up. With a shing sound, the steel sword was unsheathed. The black shadow raised the steel sword high, and the blade reflected a strange red light under the blood-red sky, and fiercely chopped down at Mu Feng. That black shadow was Leng Shiqi, who had been looking for an opportunity. Under the pincer attack of the two fierce attacks, Mu Feng's expression finally changed. At this moment, she finally understood why Great Heavens will suddenly had so much confidence. It turned out that Great Heavens will had another pure spirit realm in Great Heavens will. At this moment of life and death, she shouted, and actually ignored the black shadow behind her, and stabbed Great Heavens Will with her sword. Great Heavens Will couldn't retreat, couldn't give way. There was only one chance like this, and he had to stop Mufong. His fist aura faintly became stronger. Fist and sword collided. Mufang's sword blade slashed on Great Heavens Will's gloves, and sparks burst out. Suddenly, Mufang's sword move changed, and in an instant, a few sword flowers appeared, enveloping Great Heavens Will. But Great Heavens Will was unmoved. His fist aura sank, and using force to break technique, he forcibly resisted the sword's shadow and punched Mufang's abdomen. Pfft! Mufang's body suddenly arched, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Most of it sprayed on Great Heavens Will, but he didn't care. At this moment, Great Heavens Will's entire right arm and shoulder were cut open by Mufang's sword. Now that his fist aura was exhausted, he hurriedly retreated. Because Ling Shiqi's fierce blade had already fallen. Gold-breaking blade. Mufang smiled miserably, his heart was dead, but he still raised his thin sword to make a final resistance, but now the spirit light on the sword body was dim. Ding! Ling Shiqi's steel blade fiercely smashed onto Mufang's sword. How could the heavily injured Mufang block a blade that he had been accumulating power for a long time? Suddenly, Mufang's body sank a few inches into the ground. The second-level spirit sword in his hand held on for 2 breaths, and then suddenly broke. A second-level spirit weapon wasn't much stronger than a first-level spirit weapon in terms of material, but it was easier to channel spirit power, and could also withstand more spirit power. Ling Shiqi's blade aura didn't decrease, and the blade light slashed down. A deep wound appeared on Mufang's forehead, and then he softly fell to the ground, no longer breathing. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.